My name is David Watkins. I am the CEO of Up and Farms. We are working on a project with Piney Woods at the moment. This is a, as you can see here, this is a racial equity and justice conservation cooperative agreement that USDA has funded with Piney Woods in order to put on these workshops for the community, dealing with different areas of production and conservation. And we're really excited to be a part of this team. Along with me at Up and Farms, we have
Delaney Johnson, Soil Science and Conservation Director, Up and Farms.
Delaney comes to us after a long service. We won't tell you exactly how long because he's much younger. He's still really, really young, like 30 plus years at NRCS. Under his belt, he did a lot of the work on understanding the soils of Mississippi. And we are really privileged to have him as a part of our team and be able to have him share his knowledge with you. Also on our team, we have
Dex Hewes, Farm Technology Specialist.
Dex Hewes, Farms Technology Specialist. And Dex has recently been working on his master irrigation program, his training in that, so that he can come out and help people like yourselves work on your irrigation plans on your farms. All right, so another part of what we are doing with Up and Farms is we are partnering with NCAT, and NCAT is represented today by
Rockiell Woods, representing the National Center for Appropriate Technology, NCAT.
That's right. So Rock has been doing this for a long, long time. So many of you may know Rock. You may have heard about him. You may have seen his poster up in the post office. You know, he gets around. Be careful. Be careful with Rock over here. He's definitely the troublemaker in the group. But our other presenter today, we are very privileged to have with us from USDA.
Daniel Clanton, area agronomist here in Area 2, Central Mississippi.
Okay, and you're located in?
Pearl. My office is in Pearl, yes.
In Pearl. Okay, great. Thank you. So we have a really great team here today. We're going to talk with you about lots of stuff about the high tunnels. I think one of the most important questions that I want to ask you guys right off the bat is, you know, who's worked with a high tunnel before? High tunnel? Okay, we have 1, 2, 3. Yeah, you guys are from Choctaw. I know you've worked with high tunnels. Yes. No, Kenny's worked with high tunnels. Kenny, you say hello to everybody.
Hello, everybody.
Kenny is an installer of high tunnels, and for those of you who may be interested in getting a high tunnel installed, he is somebody who can help you, and so we are also privileged to have him here today. Kenny Cannon, yes, and his number is when you can see the screen, and we'll make sure all this stuff is up here later. Everyone's contact information is on the screen, and we'll bring this back up so that everybody can see this. So I see the young people are getting their phones out and snapping it, you know, making sure we got it. Not all the young people, other people are doing it too. I say, that's good to see. Okay, and I'm going to go back and mention that we do have some other workshops coming up. So we touch on a lot of things today that we're not going to have time to go into detail about because there's so much information. Some of that deals with soil fertility and biology itself. So we are going to have another workshop next Wednesday at the same time to really address soil fertility and biology. We're also having a workshop on water management on the farm. That's going to be at our facility at Up and Farms, and we're going to address all kinds of irrigation use and drainage at that point. And we're going to talk a lot about micro irrigation today, but we're going to leave part of that discussion for the water management workshop too. Another one, do any of you guys work with livestock or, okay, good. All right, so we have, excellent, sorry there. We have an animal care and conservation practices workshop coming up on April 17th. This one's gonna be really exciting. I haven't seen anything like this around here recently, so the veterinary staff from USDA is going to come in. They're going to talk about how to recognize animal diseases, how to act when you have animal diseases, and how to protect your herd. They're going to talk about all kinds of things on that side, and we're also going to talk about conservation practices that you want to have on your farm if you've got livestock. All right. And the last thing is that we're going to do another workshop on crop rotation theory and practice. I don't know about you guys, but crop rotation is probably one of the most confusing things to all of us. So we're going to talk about that some today because it's really, really important within a high tunnel environment that you have to do crop rotations in order to really succeed. But we are going to talk more about that when we actually do that crop rotation workshop, right? But we're going to, touch the surface on that today. All right. So that said, we're not going to really rely on this screen. I'm relying on it because I've got to know what I'm talking about. But you guys don't have to rely on looking up there. You guys can look over here. And what we're going to do is we're going to make this really interactive today, okay? So if any of you guys have questions, just holler out and let's stop and let's talk about it, because that's what we're really here to do, is to answer your questions and concerns. And there are a lot of questions. Some of you have some experience. I see a lot of you don't. So we want to put a kind of a framework into place about what a high tunnel is and about the process of bringing it together. And then we're going to get into some more of the deeper subject matter, such as how you manage the soil, how you actually manage your crops within it. And then at the end of the day, after lunch, we're going to come back out here and we're going to tour these tunnels. And based upon what we learn, we're also going to look at where they're going to do a new high tunnel. And we are going to help evaluate that site, see if they've done a good job. We'll figure it out. Have they done a good job on that or not? I don't know. We'll find out. We can talk about it. All right. So, what is a high tunnel? What's that?
Will we also discuss how to get funding for a high?
We're also going to discuss how to get funding for a high tunnel. There's a whole process for that. I'll say, in general, we have a philosophy. Even though this project is funded by NRCS, our business has a lot of funding from NRCS as well. We have representatives from NRCS here. We all work with NRCS, which is the National Resource Conservation Service, which is part of USDA. What they do is they have basically resource concerns that they look after, right? That they say, this is important to us. We as a government, as a society, value these concerns, right? In order to protect those, we are going to develop a whole series of practices, right, that we can assign out here to people that help not only protect the things that we care about from an environment, but also help in productivity in your farm in some way, all right? So you can enter into agreements with NRCS to help protect the resource concerns, and they will help provide funding for you for the practice that gets in place. And Daniel is going to talk about that in great detail. Is this right?
Sure.
You guys said it straight? Am I off path on any of that I said so far? All right, I'm near path. I'm near path. Okay, so we're gonna talk about how you can get funding for that. All right. So who knows what a high tunnel is? Who has an idea? Yes, ma'am. Well, yes. Go ahead. Tell us. What is a high tunnel?
It is a larger greenhouse structure that is
Okay, that's okay. That's a good start. That's a good start. So it's a larger greenhouse type structure.
seasonal. You can grow vegetables.
Helps you deal with seasonality. Yes. We actually have a definition here of a high tunnel, and it does hit on that. It's an enclosed polyethylene, all right, a polyethylene or plastic or fabric covered structure that is used to cover and protect your crops from the sun, wind, excessive rainfall, other elements out there in the cold, or to extend the growing season itself and this is the other part, in an environmentally safe manner. All right, so that's a lot there. Sometimes they're called hoop houses. You guys have heard of hoop houses? Hoop house and a high tunnel are basically equivalent. Yes?
What is the difference between this and a greenhouse?
It's a great question. That's a great question. Who wants to tackle that?
I will. A greenhouse is more of a permanent structure that is going to be for containerized plants that are not grown in the soil, where a high tunnel is going to be sometimes a mobile structure, but most of the time permanent due to weather concerns. If you make it mobile, you have to have it fastened down somewhere, but the crops are actually grown in the soil versus in containers like it would be in a greenhouse. And to add more to that, a greenhouse normally is heated and cooled for season ability, to be able to compact the heat or the cold. Whereas a lot of times a high tunnel is not heated or cooled. It just relies on natural ventilation, letting up the sides or closing in the curtain to let a natural airflow come over those crops to keep them at the right temperature.
We call that passively cooled or passively controlled versus a greenhouse, which is actively controlled in terms of the climate, the humidity in there and everything like that. So does that make sense to everybody? That part, it's a really more like a non-permanent structure, although when we get into it, you'll see why you may want to treat it in some ways like it's a permanent structure in terms of maintaining it, because if you don't maintain it, it will fall apart very quickly and it will not do the things you need it to do. You need to program it, you need to work with it. And the other big thing that Daniel mentioned there is that you generally grow in the soil, right? Now, especially if it's a new NRCS tunnel that they are paying for, you have to use it directly in the soil, right? So that is part of the agreement there. And do we have another question over here? Yes, ma'am.
When it's freezing outside, then the temperatures are like really, really low. Are the vegetables inside? Are they going to be okay? Is it not going to be?
All right. So this is a great question. We're going to address this in a little more detail, but we can start by answering it now. Delaney, you want to talk about that? The vegetables. When it's freezing outside.
Really cold. Now, a high tunnel is another type of alternative for extending the growing season. Now, if it's freezing outside, then that's a period during the year where a high tunnel may not be the most usable type of technology, because it's for the extending the growing season. But as far as the extreme temperatures, it is not capable of providing that protection. So.
And I'd like to add what he was saying. So there's other methods and ways that you can do that as far as with keeping that high tunnel warm. And it's basically dealt with little techniques that you can find around your home. For example, one of the things with growing, you have to know what the weather is going to be like. So if you know it's going to be cold outside or temperature is going to drop that night before, you need to take some type of measures of keeping that high tunnel warm. So one of the measures I've seen is people will take like milk jugs and they'll spray paint them black. And they put hot water in them, and then they'll place them out there in the high tunnel. And as the jug gets cold, the heat starts to come out of the jug, and it kind of will keep it warm. I've seen some people go as far as putting it in hot plastic barrels or metal barrels and putting that one of the little thermatic things in there that'll heat the barrel, and then it'll permeate heat from it. So it's little home techniques or remedies that you can think of to help warm that high tunnel in many different ways when you know the temperature is going to drop that night.
Dan, do you want to add anything to that?
Like you said, I mean, it's meant to be an extension of the growing season. It's going to be hard to make it through those harsh conditions. The occasional freeze is what it's really meant for. trying to get the vegetables planted a little earlier. That way you're not fighting it. But if you had an extended freeze, you're definitely going to have to retrofit something to try to keep some heat in there.
Yeah, so there are a lot of variables in that, okay? And what we want to do is we want to start small. You know, we want to start in a manageable way and build into something that we might expand upon, things that might cost a little more once we have a good idea of how to manage what we're starting with first. So the idea of season extension is that you might have 4 weeks at the beginning of the season or 4 weeks at the end of your season that you might not ordinarily have because of the heat that can be contained within a high tunnel, which is really good. This also depends upon what crops you're growing. There are some crops that you can grow here. If you're talking about tomatoes now, tomatoes are gonna end at some point, right? And then there are other things that you might be able to grow over the summer, over the winter. Things that really grow well in cold weather. So that gets back to the idea of doing a rotation. Now, there are some people up north. We don't do this a lot down here, and I don't believe this is a Mississippi scenario that's supported right now. But a lot of people actually will have 2 layers on the cover roof of their tunnel, right? But if you do that, you have to have a pump that pumps air in between the layers so that they don't touch. Otherwise, you know, you'll build up humidity and mold and things like that. So you have to separate those layers, but you can provide that, and the second layer knocks down like 7 degrees, something like that. However, there is something else to keep in mind. All right, this is not. We're not just talking about keeping things warm. If that were it, then we probably could grow a lot more. We could have low tunnels inside the high tunnels. You know, we could do that. We can do a lot more to keep things warm. But the other thing that you're really competing with is the lack of daylight hours. All right, that's something that comes into real play as we start to get in the winter months. So does anyone know how many daylight hours there are at the peak of the summer here in Mississippi, in a month, in a given month? Well, let's say that the most, let's say like we're talking about July, you know, in that period around July, what the average number of daylight hours we get in that month.
So like the sun rises like 5 or 6 in the morning, and then you can stay outside till 8:30.
Yeah, when we get really good, we get something that could create heat units for the crops to grow and contribute to that. Well, it's about 300 hours. 300 hours at the peak month. All right, so at the low month, how many hours do we think we might get? That's a good guess. It's 150. So you think about that, you've got 300 at your peak, and you've got 150 down here. You got twice as much sun, right? Yes, ma'am.
How much per day?
It varies. It varies. I mean, it's a cycle. It just goes all the way through. You know, so in those summer months, you're going to have a lot more daylight, you know, a lot more time to grow your crops. And hold on, yes, ma'am, one second. Yes, sir, one second. So what do we need to grow our crops? What do we need to grow our crops?
We need good soil, and the fertility, and we need the biology, and we need topsoil in order to have that good, healthy germination of your seeds.
All right.
So soil is the basic driving factor on what we need.
Soil, that's where the food comes from, right? So we need the food that comes from the soil, we need water, and we need sun,
Yeah.
right? We need those 3 things. So if we're deprived of sun, we're getting half as much sun, we're not going to get nearly as much growth. So this
Right.
becomes a real issue on top of the cold. So we have to factor that in for that season, which might mean if you're gonna grow something, you might want to have starters. You might want to start them as transplants, work with a greenhouse that's going to be able to do that, and then bring them in when they're a little farther along. All right, and you can bring in heat, as Rock was saying. You can do that, but you still are gonna. The growth is still going to be a lot slower in the wintertime. Yes.
But let's talk about that chemical that the top. Did you talk about that product? Did you talk about that?
Can we talk about the product itself?
The health insurance associated with polyethylene.
Okay. Does anybody know of any direct health issues associated with polyethylene? It's
I just pulled it up on my phone, and I had some issue. I bought something with that chemical, and I had a problem with it. I had to go with the product that I bought. Paper came from whatever. I threw it away, but I had to look up because I have some health issues.
okay.
And I was just, when it came up there, that's what people in Nashville thought we knew about it, but it says that it has an effect. You know, I think it's the way they count it. You know, if you own the product or has count or something like that, instead of look it up. I advise everybody to look up that word, get into YouTube, because it can affect the health. It can cause health problems.
There are all kinds of things that can contribute. Yes, and this is no. It's important to know that this is a manufactured plastic, and it's not a direct exposure to a chemical to ethylene itself. Although ethylene is a natural chemical that tomatoes and other fruits and vegetables produce. They produce that naturally, and we're exposed to that anytime we have it in our kitchen because they let off that gas naturally. But so this is related to that. But it is a plastic. It's in a manufactured form. But if we find out anything about that exposure, then we will certainly pass it on too. Okay, so yes, ma'am.
I just have a quick question related to the amount of sunlight that the crops get in the high tunnel. So I know that you're encouraged to use that shade cloth at the height of the summer to control that, but at what point is it is there a standardized date where you're expected to remove that shade cloth so that the crops can get more sunlight going into that time when the sunlight hours are decreasing?
I'm going to say no. There's not a standard for that because you're looking at, first of all, you're looking at different climates, so you'd have to talk about a standard that's really local, but then it's also going to apply more specifically to what you're growing and the heat tolerance of those specific crops.
Right.
So it's really going to vary by crop. So there are some things that you may really want a shade cloth, and you can do the shade cloth over the tunnel itself, or you can do the shade cloth over the crops inside the tunnel, or a combination of those things. But that's really going to be dependent upon crops itself. Yeah. Delaney, did you have anything, Rock?
Yeah, I mean, for example, like right now, it's not as hot, so you wouldn't have the shade cloth on right now. But in the summertime, when we get into 90, 100 degrees, and you want to put that shade cloth over it then to try to, cool it down some, and probably roll the sides up so it won't be as hot in there. So that's what the shade cloth is designed to do.
Yeah, think about it just like yourself when you're out there working the garden. This time of year it's enjoyable. You get to June, July, it feels a lot better to be under that shade tree. So that's the same principle.
Yeah, right. Yes, ma'am.
Water in the crop in the tunnel. Period.
Yeah, that's a big issue, and let's hold on that for 1 second, and we'll come back to that because it's a whole topic, and we really want to get to that. Before we get to that though, let's talk about that tunnel itself because we have questions about shade cloth. You know, we have questions about other areas of season extension, double poly, and things like that. But let's kind of look at the basics of a high tunnel. We actually have one right here. Dex, I don't know if you can bring that out so that people can see that a little bit.
This is a 1/14th, yeah, if you want to. This is a 1/14th scale model of a 30 by 75 foot high tunnel. And what we've got inside here is a mock-up of, I believe it's tomato rows. A standard, what is it, 30?
Those are like tomato rows, what they'd be like inside there, yes.
But that's a lot like what one of these is, about the same size. And this is a scale model just to show you. They come in a vast array of styles and designs. You know, there's Gothic ones up north that have a steep peak right at the top, which helps shed snow when snow hits it. We don't see those very common around here just because we don't have very much snow. But that's generally what one looks like. It's got some of the basic components that a lot of them have. The end walls on this one are very large and opened up, but they can vary as well. You can have, you know, individual single panel doors. You can have larger eaves so that you can have gable vents. You can have roof vents, but that's generally what one looks like.
All right, we're rolling through that real fast. So as you can see up here, this is Dex mentioned Gothic, and then we have a Quonset. This is a Quonset version, which has a rounded top, but a Gothic has more like a steeple. And as Dex said, we don't really see those down here as much because one of the ways NRCS does the practice is they come back and they look at this and they say, what is the demand, what's the need here? And then they develop specific scenarios that are most likely to be appropriate down here. We don't really have the snow kind of issue. And that's something that you really want when you, if you're looking at something that's more like a Gothic. So that's going to be a scenario that's more up north and in other areas of the country. But here we use Quonset really by default. Now Dex was talking about a couple of things in there too. This is one thing. You look at it this way. And you see there's a really big opening over here, right? So there could be anything over here. You know, you can put all kinds of in-wall configuration over here, but generally you want this to be able to have the air come in. The air come in and go out the other side, the wind to come in this direction. Dex mentioned gables, which are a way of controlling this. Really letting that heat out. Because what happens when you have, where does heat go in your house? It goes up. Anyone who has an attic knows that. They go up there in their attic and they're like, oh, time for me to come back down. You know, we don't like that. It gets hot. So if you notice that in your house, you have some gables typically on either end of the house, and that is to help let out some of that heat. But it doesn't really do an enormous amount of circulation, but it does help control that. Daniel, anything else you want to say about the gables and the control of the environment within the high tunnel itself?
If you are interested in a high tunnel, the ones that are funded through the Natural Resource Conservation Service are not retrofitted with any type of extra ventilation or electrical ventilation or heating. But if that is something you wanted to add on your own, as long as it's done to the manufacturer specifications, that is allowed.
Oh, we had a lot of hands come up on that one. You're like, oh, heating. Oh, yeah. Yes. Yes, ma'am.
I just saw you had, when I was driving down, you had those big fans.
Yeah, and that's an option for you as a landowner if you want to go above and beyond and put that in. But as far as through the program-wise, they don't pay anything on the electrical components in a high tunnel.
I saw two more hands come out. Yes, ma'am.
Is it just rolling down the sides? Is that adequate for ventilation, or do you need to have ventilation over the ends, like on the end wall?
In Mississippi, you really need to have both.
No.
You need to have both so that heat has a place to escape. So this is really these sidewalls right here. So we haven't really talked about that, but this is the way that the high tunnel works. This is technology. We don't think of this as, oh, it's just a little thing. It's not. This is actually really sophisticated engineered technology. These sides are intended to come up, all right? So you can have a rope where you pull it, or now they have handles that are on there. And some people, decide, you know what, I want to automate mine. So they have mechanical ones where they press a button, they can have it on a timer. This can be great because you will learn with the high tunnel that you really have to maintain it. You have to pay a lot of attention to it, and maybe you're not there certain times that maybe you have another job and you want to press that button and, bring the sides up while you're at work, and because that is what's really important to have that circulation going through here, all right? So it's circulation of the air that will come through here, or I guess ventilation will come through here. That's not necessarily circulating, but the ventilation will come through there, and it'll help reduce that heat. So that's really a critical piece of that. Yes, ma'am.
Is the choice of using the plastic cover just an economic choice instead of something that would be rigid and something you would have to change periodically? Because I know it would break down over time at the sun.
About 4 years is the estimated. The lifespan of a tunnel is about 8 years, and the lifespan of the plastic is about 4. And during that time, it may last less than that, but it's designed to last about 4. But you may see some slight degradation in terms of the ability for sunlight to continue to come in. So you may see some issues with dust buildup and things like that over time too.
But it is an economic choice why you're choosing the plastic to do
Well,
that.
there's a benefit to the plastic because you can see the plastic is not completely translucent, and that has a benefit in that diffuses the light that's coming into the tunnel and actually improves the growing conditions. So there's a benefit to having that slightly translucent but not fully transparent.
And yes, it is
material.
less expensive than a greenhouse. And so this is meant to be something that is a lower cost footprint to get into with this, but there are a lot of options for expanding it. So once you start understanding how to play with the environment within here, about really operating the side flaps, knowing when to bring them up. So it used to be that, there's a piece here, these are called hip boards, and you think of them, well, maybe they're around the hip level, and that's the way they used to be, but they've realized that they really need to be higher. And especially if you've got something like tomatoes in there, you really need 5 feet or 6 feet, on those hip boards to come in there, so you can get that extra ventilation and it can come over the plant canopy. All right, so you start thinking about how you're going to manage that. By the way, there are a lot of things that you want to look at about where you put the high tunnel. This is site selection. Daniel's going to talk about this in a second. When you talk about site selection, a lot of variables that go into that. The sun, but the number one thing is really the wind, the direction of the prevailing wind. That is one of the most important factors that you want to think about, so that you don't have your tunnel setting up like this and you have a wind blowing this way, because that will that will blast off your tunnel or collapse it. Yes, sir.
Yes, that's what I was going to ask. See, this is mostly look like north-south, I guess.
Yeah, actually,
those are east-west.
East-west.
Yeah.
Okay.
Those are east-west.
Where is that? I had that in here somewhere.
And I saw it's recommended that
I'll have to find that.
depending on your area, where you get most of your wind, you want to turn it to where it won't do the most damage. So, east west.
Yeah.
For example, if we were getting the north wind, if we were getting wind out of the north coming, it wouldn't affect those tunnels from the side. It'll just go over them. But if it was coming in the front of it, it could damage the doors. It push the doors open. It could damage and push it back. Some of the bows, the purlins, and things could get bent.
All right. Ignore the other parts about that. But this is actually the.
But I'm sorry, you do have to be careful with the sidewalls. If the sidewalls are up in high winds, it can create basically the foil shape like an airplane wing. It'll literally cause lift and pick it up. So if winds are starting to pick up in speed, you need to drop those sidewalls, or else it literally will lift off.
Can y'all see this? All right. So this is actually here. All right. So this is an overhead. This is north, right here. This is north, south, and then this is east and west, right here. Okay. So you see the tunnels are more in the direction of southwest to northeast. That's what they're going.
How y'all doing today?
This is the direction of the prevailing wind, as I looked up yesterday. Now, that may it can alter, but if you're looking at this, we do know that they've had some issues with tunnels out here collapsing. That's definitely happened. So, when you're looking at site selection, it's something we want to look at today. Where would be the best position for this to come through? All right. So ideally, if you're looking at east to west, for example, then you are going to get. How is this with the sun, Daniel? If you're east west versus north south.
The general rule of thumb is if you are above the 40-degree latitude line, which is well north of here. We're situated about the 32 to 31-degree latitude line. Anything north of that, you want to be east and west because of the axis of the sun shining. You get more sunlight on that tunnel throughout the day. Here, we're below that line, so you can be more at the north to south or the southwest to northeast direction. Also, because most of our prevailing winds off of storms comes out of south, southwest, west, that area, and it helps with that wind flow as well.
If you look at, I'm just going to take the top of this tunnel off. So if we look at this for a second, and we think about, this is north, okay? That's north. This is south. Or from your guys' perspective, this is north and that's south. All right. So if we're facing north south, we are going to get, as it comes from east-west, we're going to get more sun over here. If it's this way, we're going to get more uniform sun. Actually, that's wrong. It's backwards. This way, you're going to get more uniform sun, okay, across the whole thing. But this, you're going to get more overall sun. So this might be something to think about going this way, going east-west, if you are really going to try to plant over the winter or something like that. Late fall, winter, early spring, you're just going to get a little more exposure on the crop overall because of the course of the sun, all right? Does that make sense? We can look at that when we get out there in the field. This is a really good situation up here because, on the one hand, because they don't have any other buildings or trees out there, right? So why might that be a good thing?
More sun, the direction of the wind, because it's not affected by the trees.
That's right. Okay, so a couple of things within that. Shade, right? So if you've got trees or other buildings or even another high tunnel that's too close, it's going to block the sun. All right, you're not going to get as much sunlight. So it's 2.5 times the height, something like that?
Yeah, whatever the nearest structure is, it's recommended to go 2.5 times the height of that structure away from it to get out of the shading.
Okay. Yeah, so that's a big thing. We don't want to be too close to any other buildings or trees. At the same time, we're looking out here, And I mean, can y'all feel the wind right now? Yeah, I can feel the wind. You can see how this could kind of pick up in a hurry. And that might be putting some pressure on these tunnels, which, you know, on the one hand, you want some wind, but on the other hand, you don't want wind, you know? So maybe there needs to be a windbreak somewhere, all right? Does anyone know what a windbreak is? Sort of, kind of?
Something that would block the wind from going straight to the tunnel.
Something that would break the wind, kind of like a breakfast, when you break your fast. Yes, okay. Other things came to mind right there about breaking wind, but I will, you know, I will not say that. Okay, we'll move on. We're moving on. All right, yeah. But what are some potential, Delaney, what are some options for windbreaks that we might have out here?
There's pollinator establishment, pollinator strips. You can use different type of vegetation on that. You know, small shrubs, some type of orchard, fruit orchard, trees,
Tree
lines, and it's all beneficial, all compatible with your high tunnel operation.
So that's very practical to think about that.
Vegetation or fruit trees or something
Fruit
that
trees.
just put in place for the wind to be.
Right, they just retard or kind of reduce the wind velocity in order to try to maintain your objective.
I've been raising for a while. While you're talking about like the solar eclipse that they're talking about, I don't know what the date is, but how does it affect the high tunnel? April 8th. But okay, so how does it have an effect on the high tunnel? No light. You know, the high tunnel is
All right, so what are the three things that the crop needs to grow?
the soil,
The food, the water, and the light, right? So what would an eclipse deprive it of?
or the light.
Of the light. All right, so what's it not going to get? It's not going to get heat units, all right, that the light helps create. And those heat units are what, that energy that it needs to help grow. So you're talking how many hours of an eclipse?
4, 3, maybe 2. 2 to 4 hours.
Yeah, you know, you're going to lose, you know, it's not an entire eclipse, a part eclipse. Maybe you lose 30 minutes overall of heat units during that day. And we're in April, so we might be looking at maybe 225 hours that month. So you lose half an hour maybe from that month. So that's not going to have as big of an impact. All right, that's something to be overly concerned about. But you guys can see this slide about sunlight now, right? So that's kind of what you might want to be thinking about. Also, keep in mind that trees grow. Trees grow. So something that you may put out there is not in the shade today, it may be tomorrow, because trees grow. All right. So do keep that in mind. So these are what you see up here on the screen right now. We can talk about these as we go through, but these are kind of the variables you want to think about when you're trying to select your site. Sunlight, right? Which direction, you know, how much, orientation of the tunnel, and we were just talking about that. The soil, all right, and we're going to talk about that. Drainage and topography, that is really, really important. And along with that, I'll mention that in a second. Wind, we talked about wind, but that's another thing you have to think about in terms of your site selection. Accessibility. And what do I mean by accessibility? What's that? Can you get to it and from it easily? Can your supplies get to it and from it easily? Can you get your stuff where you want to pack it, you know, in and out easily? You know, can you access it? You know, how's the road? You know, there are a lot of issues about access that you want to think about. And water. Okay, water. So that is, we said we're going to talk about water, and you know, we're kind of coming back to that. So what does not happen when you've got this roof on here?
No rainwater.
No rain. You got no rain. So in some ways, it's a really good thing because we're controlling those elements. We're managing them, right? But if we're not really controlling it, we're not really attending to it, we're not really managing, we're just letting it do its own thing, you're not going to get any water on your crops. And what do we say the 3 things that crops need?
Water, soil, and sun.
That's right. So we would be depriving the crops of one of the things, right? So what does that mean that we're going to need to do? Irrigation, right? So we're going to have to find a way to irrigate it. All right, so what are some options for irrigation in a high tunnel?
A little drip.
Micro irrigation, drip tape. Yes, yes.
Plain old hose.
Plain old hose. You take a plain old hose in there. You can do that. You can even do overhead irrigation. There's some problems with that though. You know, in a high tunnel, it may not be the best scenario, but you can do it. You know, sometimes you do what you have to do, right? But drip irrigation is probably the best way. You know, does anyone want to add anything to that?
Well, I guess if we're talking general irrigation, we also have to remember that, as we said, we're blocking the rain, and as we talked about the other day, 1 inch of rain hitting a tunnel this big equates to 1,200 gallons. So just think about how much rain we've had lately. We've been getting 1 inch of rain in a night easy. So you just got 1,200 gallons rolling off that tunnel, which you could use if you catch it, but also if your setup around the tunnel's not correct, you're going to have ponding. And those of you who have high tunnels, you might encounter this, where you have small lakes form around the edge of the tunnel from all that water shedding off of it. And if it's not set up correctly, it can bleed back inside the tunnel and flood your crops. So we have to be aware of that water. We're blocking the water, but it still has to go somewhere.
This is a really good point. So think about that. We said 1,200 gallons of water, all right, is coming off of this roof for every inch of rain. So every inch of rain that's hitting that roof, right, you've got 1,200 gallons of water that are coming off to the sides, all right? So if you've got 5 inches of rain, you're talking almost 70,000 gallons, 68,400. Okay, I did look that up beforehand. I'm not just doing that in my head. About 68,400 gallons of water. That's a lot of water, right? So where's it going to go?
Back to the ground.
And what's going to happen to that ground?
Soggy.
If it's not sloped right, it's gonna get,
It's gonna run off.
All right, so I heard runoff. If it's not sloped right, it's only where's some things that can happen to us if that water is happening like that.
Where you're going to get erosion, because if you have that runoff at that volume, there's no soil. Even if it's sandy, it will not infiltrate at that rate. So what you're going to get some erosion that's going to probably potentially occur. So what you would try to do is try to have some type of directional catchment system, maybe dikes or berms around your unit in order to direct that water flow off-site. You don't want it to come back into your system. You want it to go off-site. And you want it to go to a particular directed location downstream and into your stream system or creek or whatever. But at the same time, whenever you have some type of artificial implement or structure on a soil or on a surface, you have to account for the erosion problems, the compaction problems, because water is going to do some effect, have some impact on that surface. Because as you see, this is a covered surface. It's kind of like this concrete slab here. It's covered. So water gotta run off the rooftop, it gotta go somewhere. So you look at that same effect, so that you look at trying to capture the whole system, because at some point in time, if you don't consider that on the front end when you're installing it, the erosion is gonna gully and eat back into your structure. So you have to think of those things ahead of time in order when you're planning your site location and then your orientation, your slope, your relief, all these things have to be factored in before you even put that structure on the ground.
You talked about slope. All right, slope, relief, grade. These are all kind of the same term, right? So there's some standards. I think the NRCS standard is it 10%?
5.
5.
5%.
Right, 5%. All right. In order to be compliant with NRCS, you can't have higher than a 5% grade from the end of one tunnel to the other end. All right.
And that 5% doesn't sound like a lot, but you're talking about 5 feet over 100 feet. That's a lot. That's stretching it, in my opinion. You would probably want to get that down to 1% or less, if possible.
Think about that water. Think about that water coming off here and how fast it's going to want to come down and how much erosion is going to be happening on the sides of this tunnel.
You also got to remember, the slope isn't just dealing with the water problem. It's also because the kits aren't meant to be put together at a slope greater than that. You try and put it together in a slope greater than 5%, it literally won't assemble. It's built to be assembled a certain way.
That's right. And I know that there's one contractor that it's in their specs. They may hire you or you may hire them to come and do an installation, but they will not install it. If they come to your site, they drop off the kit, they will not install it if that grade is higher than 5%. They're just not going to do it. Yes, ma'am.
How feasible is it to do a rain catchment system with guttering on a structure like this?
That is such a good question. Yeah. So, first of all, we had another farmer ask us that question recently, and we just went out to his farm and did a whole tour and a study of it, looking at catchment systems. So we can actually talk a little further about that. Dex has some great information about that. Delaney has some great knowledge about that, and they can talk a little more in depth about that. But in terms of a gutter system, Daniel, is this the first year?
Yes.
So this is the first year that NRCS actually will pay for gutters on a high tunnel.
Oh, wow.
And not only that, it's not only for the big high tunnels, the 72 by 30, but it's also on the 20 by 30. And we hadn't really talked about that. We got a big high tunnel out here, but we haven't really mentioned that you can do a 20 by 30 high tunnel. And that may be a better option. That's about 600 square feet. So we're talking about a quarter of growing space of what you're going to get here. But that may be all you need, right? But yes, a gutter system. Is there anything, Daniel, that you could talk about that with the gutters themselves? Any of the specs on that?
That's going to fall under the engineering side, and honestly, I'm not very well versed in since it's so new, I don't know exactly all the specifications and parameters.
Well, you're saying you're going to be finding it out just as we are.
Yes.
Exactly. Yes. Just as everybody else is. But this is a really exciting new offering to actually have gutters to be able to be installed. Dex, did you want to?
Well, the one thing that we dealt with when talking to people about this is you have to remember that you can do the gutter system. It's absolutely feasible, but you have to have a pump, because just because you catch the water doesn't mean it's going to flow through your irrigation system. If you have drip irrigation that takes 10 psi to run, you have to have a water tower that's plus 12 feet in the
That's
air.
for water catchment.
Yeah.
Okay, that's not for the. So let's make the distinction here. The gutter system is one thing, all right, and the gutter system is intended to have relief so that it's preventing erosion from happening.
Right.
You can
add a catchment system to it, so it actually you store those 1,200 gallons of water and you can reuse it.
Oh, wow.
And that's what the people we've been talking to they're wanting to do. And it's like, yeah, that's doable. You just have to have at least a small pump to run it to your irrigation system, because the water just sitting in the tank can't automatically flow out of the irrigation.
So, yes, sir. No, sir. No, sir. It does not. You have to do a little bit of a. Well, I haven't seen the specs for NRCS, but it will not get in the way of that. I have seen a gutter system installed on it, and you have to do a little tweaking around the edge, but it does not disrupt the flaps. It comes above the flaps, but you actually have to make sure in the installation that there aren't any gaps in between. So you have to bring the flap down the top part into the gutter itself, right? So that there's no gap and the water is going to come inside the tunnel. So that's all manageable, and there are the specs for that, but it doesn't lead to that. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
have two questions. Now, you say, what if you have to replace the plastic? Do you have to take the gutters down and put them back up? Okay.
So, okay, we'll answer that part first. From the previous system that we've seen, you would not have to take the gutter down in order to replace the top plastic or the side plastic. You should be able to do. I think you should be able to do that without having to take the gutter down on the side. But I do know that you wouldn't have to for the top.
Now I'm trying to understand, if you get the gutters, you're saying, because mine, there's lots of water coming down, they come down inside the gold.
Oh, wow.
They come down on the shade cloth and get inside as well. So are you saying you need a pump, after you catch the water, you're needing something?
Let's look at this. Delaney, you may want to step over here to see this screen. I don't know if you can see it, but we were going to talk about, and I don't know if you guys can see that. We're talking about the drainage issue. Okay, so this is what you might look at like a standard high tunnel right here. But this is what it looks like when you've got a drainage system, a ditch system down the side. All right, can you guys see that? So this is a pretty great little device here that instead of gutter system, one thing they've done is they've created a pad. All right, so you want to do that in general when you put your high tunnel out there, but you want to make that pad a little bigger than the high tunnel itself. All right, so you have a little space over there so you can carve out some drains, some ditches on the side.
Right. And what you want to do is prevent unwanted water inside your system. What we were talking about, rainfall, precipitation, then that's no longer the way to operate because we're working on a controlled environment, a controlled system. Because one thing about it, if it's just outside water getting in that is unwanted, you don't know what it's getting in and how the volume of it and what the effect is causing on your plants and stuff. So what you want to do is try to restrict any type of entry of water coming back into your system. And we see right here on this picture, we have where you have a trench and you have some plastic coating and look like they tried to make sure they try to prevent any type of backflow into your system. But one thing you always want to do, you always want to have some type of outlet, not just prevent it from coming back into the system, but develop you an outlet and so some type of controlled location and off-site away from your system. Because you know gutters on our households, we see the gutters is to get water away from your structure, away from your base. So it's the same principle here. You want to get that water moved away and not just in this trench. If it comes down, get it away from your site, off-site.
Yes, sir. And look at this, the next slide here. So what we see is, here's before, and okay, so we've installed that beside the tunnel now. So we've got our little drains there. And in this way, the drains and the gutters are really doing the same purpose, to a large degree. However, with the gutter system, it does lend itself much more easily to a water catchment, so that you can recirculate that water and even combine it with your other irrigation water and mix those two things together, which is sometimes it can be a really good thing to do.
Dave, let me inject something right quick.
Yeah. They'll clean water. Yes, sir.
You remember years ago, our grandparents used to go to visit their house. They had those tin roofs and had a barrel right there in that corner in that apex and stuff. But we ain't inventing that. they knew it all the time. You could catch water that ran off from your system, and then it was a recycling system then. They recycle that water, they would wash clothes with and everything. So
well, and it's worth mentioning that it is a cost-saving maneuver because in some not everywhere, but in some counties, they don't want you pumping for certain hours of the day. They'll limit, say you can't pump from these to these hours, or they'll have a much higher price for pumping through certain hours. So it can save you a lot of money depending on where you are and what your municipal situation is.
Yeah. Plants love rainwater over hose water any day.
What's that?
Plants love rainwater over hose water
any day. They do. Although I will say, you probably cannot rely on getting enough irrigation water just from your water catchment system. That's not going to happen. So you're going to need to have another source of irrigation coming in, and you can mix that water from the catchment, from the runoff, with that, and that can help reduce your costs and have a different kind of flavor of the water. Yes, ma'am.
What do you do if you don't know anything about the drip or the catchment? I bought 2 rain barrels. They're not collecting water. I ordered a lot of material from, I think it's Hoss, H-O-S-S farming, and I've got like long strips and this and the PSI, and it's just sitting in the box.
Well, you know why? Because you didn't come to our drip irrigation workshop.
I'm trying here. My day job
November
consumes
27th.
me.
Okay, first of all, a couple things. We did record that. It's all online now.
Okay, great.
So it's 3 hours long.
Okay.
So we went into real depth on micro irrigation, talking about all the parts and pieces of it.
Okay.
All right,
I'll go
and
find
we did that here, and then we went out there. What's his name? Chris
Friedman.
Chris Friedman from
Irrigation Mart.
Irrigation Mart. Thank you. Thank
Okay.
you. He was here to help do the demo.
Oh, man. Okay.
We can also come out to your farm and help you with
That's
that.
what I was looking for.
That is why.
What do I do? Mass and lunch?
If
Okay.
no one asks us to the prom, we don't show up.
Okay.
So if you want us to come out there, this is what Dex has gotten his training in
Okay.
to help be able to provide that kind of service.
Awesome.
So this is something too. On this next slide, you kind of saw that. And Delaney, what do we see out here? This is kind of what you were talking about a second ago. The water's got to go somewhere when it comes off, right? And so this is like a little stream down at the end of the property. So what are some issues that we may have with that?
That's true. And you see where it started doing here, ballooning out. So you're going to have a pond almost, right? You're going to eventually have a pond. And anywhere you have inundation, then you deprive that area of oxygen because water has filled those voids where oxygen air was, and the soil can't breathe any longer. Okay, so it says if this is somewhere inside the greenhouse, outside, you have a field out there. Then you have drowned that area of your garden, of your greenhouse. So of your high tunnel. So this is why it's so critical to account for water volume, water direction, and precipitation and where it's going to travel to. Now, we are looking at wherever you have a system, you got some volume, you got some velocity, water is flowing, it's taking some with it. It's not water, it's not going to travel by itself. So what is taking with it? It's soil. Okay, that contributes to erosion because it's taking soil particles, and what other is if it's taking the soil, it's taking some nutrients, and fertilizer and all that. And where is it taking it? Down into your stream, down into your...
So that's what we call a water quality issue?
That's a water quality issue. That's a water quality concern.
So it's not just erosion.
Not just
But
erosion.
it is erosion, but that erosion is can lead to a serious water quality concern for your own property, also for your neighbors.
Since
Right.
we're talking about erosion and irrigation, this seems an appropriate time to bring up the benefits of cover cropping and permanent green covers.
So if we look at this space over here, we see a gap, right? What could go in there? What could happen?
Flowers?
Well,
Grass?
we were putting something in here, and in NRCS terms, they would call this a critical area planting. And this is something that you'll learn this, but if you get, we talked about resource concerns before, right? And we just mentioned water quality is one, water quality, water quantity is another, air quality, soil health. There are about 43 different resource concerns overall that NRCS looks at, right? They analyze these, and they want to know how does every practice impact these concerns. All right, well, it turns out high tunnels are really good for plant health and productivity, all right? But they contribute to erosion, all right? They can contribute to erosion. If unabated, they will contribute to erosion. So you have to have other practices, right, that offset some of the negative pieces of a high tunnel installation. One of those things, gutters can help with this on that, but another thing that can help would be a critical area planting. Delaney, can you describe what this is?
Yeah, and for instance, if we have 100 by 100 area, all that 100 by 100 is not going to be able to be planted. It's going to have some issue with it. It may be slope, it may be steepness, it may be too clay, it may be too sandy, it may have a concave shape about it, it may pond, collect water, it may just be an area where it's marginal that is not suitable for planting, period. So what you want to do is these non-planted zones that generally are the areas that are subject to be, I guess, mishandled or misused. And that's where you generally, where your water starts collecting that because, well, I can't plant that in anyway, I can't do nothing with it. The next thing you know, you got a gully farming or something in it because, you know, it's abandoned. It's no use to me. I can't plant my greens, I can't plant my peas, butter beans, and squash in it, so I just let it sit there.
Everybody know what a gully is? She didn't know what a gully is.
A gully is a washed out area you've seen like on road ditches and stuff where you see this bare soil material that has been eroded out and washed out, and you see where just a big void that forms.
Think of this as land, and think of this as a gully in the land.
Yeah.
Right. So that's like that land has gone away because it's washed out. Okay. So that's what a gully is, and it starts small.
Yeah.
What does it start as?
It started as a real, just a little seam, just a little network, and you can see it. And then next thing you know, it's real, where you see big washouts and channels that's going down, it's washing out your soil, and you don't have any more topsoil because all that's gone already. So you're down into your subsoil, which is no good. And then next thing you know, you got a big void in the ground. That's where your gully starts to develop. A gully is really, it didn't start as a gully, but over time, if it's left alone, not handled or not corrected, then it will develop into a big washout, big blowout, big gully area. And then it's really going to become a cost issue then because it's going to just continue to be eating back at your structure, eating back at your natural ground. So therefore, we want to try to stabilize these areas. And the engineering, like Daniel was saying, they could come in and put some type of catchment or stopgap system in where you've seen those big gravels or big boulders, big rocks where they put in ditches where you restrict the volume and the flow and the velocity of your water, because water, when it moves, what it does, it cuts. Yeah. That water just cuts. Over time, it'll cut. And next thing you know, you got a big void in the ground. So that is what we try to avoid doing. So we always want to put some green. What's this color? Green, right? Mm-hmm. It's not by accident the color is green, because we've heard of green space in our parking lots in urban areas. We heard green space. And also it provides two benefits. Green space, it protects the soil. It protects the soil. I mean, you have a cap on your head, right? So what are you protecting it? So you're going to have some type of cover. All soils we express, and that's another subject, another topic, but some type of cover. And then that cover protects the soil from erosion, from rainfall, raindrops, then hitting the soil, detaching it, and transporting it, what we call erosion. Okay, so prevent that, have some type of permanent cover on the surface at all times. Wherever you see right here, all these fields out here, you see grass. Okay, so that is pasture land, but still that's serve as a protective cover, but also serve as feed for the livestock, feed for the cattle. Okay, another thing that what's called conservation cover, green cover, it also helps with the atmosphere, because green cover, that's the carbon. It's processing carbon. So we heard climate smart, global change, climate change, all that stuff. That's another benefit of type of green cover. So what we're doing, we're attacking two birds in one stone here. We have a green cover that's protecting the soil from erosion, and also it's helping the carbon footprint. It's helping reduce the carbon footprint. Okay. and it's helping provide, and it's helping protect the soil from erosion.
And the root system, yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Sorry. Yes, ma'am.
I was also thinking about, almost on all sides of the high tunnel, putting raised beds so that when the water comes off that high, like my high tunnel is on the highest point of my property. So when the water comes down off that, it would hit those raised beds and slow it down and give it time to percolate down and water those beds. Is that a good?
Well, it sounds like those beds are being used kind of like a berm that to trap the water people from. But now, as far as, I guess that's outside the description of what's going on inside the tunnel.
Outside, yeah.
It is outside. That's kind of a different. Well, be effective in a sense of restricting the erosion and water movement off-site. But as far as trying to achieve the objective of the high tunnel, then that probably wouldn't.
No, it's not related to that.
Right,
I'm
yeah.
just saying to stop
So
the
do you think that could be a good, well, first of all, a stop for erosion, but also a good source of like water moisture, soil moisture for the plants that exist outside of the tunnel?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just to
Yeah.
slow the speed of that water.
Well, let me share this with you. Okay, now you say raised beds. Okay, now your natural ground is pretty stable and for the most part. Okay, now you putting another type of permeable surface on top of solid ground, and then you're going to have that contact there, that interface, which high volume of rainfall is just going to wash that on away because it's not there to stabilize it. There's nothing there to hold it. I mean, for heavy rainfall, then you still going to have a problem because you have a material that has been brought in and layered down on the natural ground, and once water infiltrates, it gets down to that contact where your natural ground was, and then it can't infiltrate down fast enough. What it's going to do, if it can't go down, it's going to shift, it's going to move. And what we said beforehand, we said when the water moves, it's going to take something with it. Okay, so you're going to have that, it's going to wash all that material, your bed, it's going to end up down slope on you and stuff. So it really wouldn't be a good, I guess, type of material to use to try to trap water. No,
So you should have a buffer. You need a buffer before that.
Right. Because you're going to have that contact.
Like a gutter. Like a gutter, or yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Some
Natural burn.
a natural berm into the ground. Yeah.
Natural burn. Yes, ma'am.
A slope, yes.
Is there a particular size of house that's and if I wanted to have multiple tunnels, what's the distance between?
So okay, so you said I couldn't hear the first part of it.
Is there like a particular size, like is smaller better or bigger better?
Okay, all right. So here's something that's really interesting, and I didn't know this because I hadn't seen this in Mississippi, but this is a thing. And Daniel actually mentioned it too, that he said, you know, they normally stay where they are, you know, the high tunnels do. But so there are two parts to that. One is different sizes. First of all, high tunnels, you can make them any size you want, all right? But the better shape is like 2 to 1 in terms of length to width. All right, so having something more like 2 to 1 is it's a better geometric shape. But they can come in any sizes. Now, NRCS will only do cost sharing for 2 particular sizes in Mississippi. All right, so those scenarios only exist here for 20 by 30 and 72 by 30. Is that right?
No.
I'm
honestly,
totally wrong.
The Mississippi is the maximum amount we can pay on is 2,178 square feet. That would be the maximum size. And about the closest kit you're going to get to that is going to be a 30 by 72 or 30 by 75, somewhere in that neighborhood, which is, you know, right there at that mark. But we can pay on smaller size tunnels if they are, you know, a manufactured kit. And your question as far as the size, that's all going to depend on your operation and what you're looking to get out of it. You know, in Mississippi, we're really blessed with a pretty mild climate. And like we've discussed earlier, you may only be gaining 4 weeks 4 weeks early planting on this high tunnel. So there's also that scenario or thought process you have to think about. Cost. How much is it going to cost me to install this high tunnel? My maintenance on the high tunnel. Just because you got a high tunnel doesn't mean you're just going to automatically go to growing vegetables and be productive. I mean, it takes work. You're going to have to baby it constantly. It's just like a garden. You're going to go out there every day and look at it. And so there's always that. That's going to be farm specific on what size you would actually need. Bigger would not always be better. Bigger may be a burden on you financially and from a standpoint of being able to manage it with labor, specific on yourself.
Right. It's interesting that, so part of the answer to that question is if you're not looking for cost sharing as well, you can do any size you want. Right, but it is a matter of cost, but it's also how you want to use it. So there's ways of using tunnels. I know you guys have a lot of tunnels, and I don't know if you've looked at this yet or even thought about this, but I know up north they are installing tunnels on tracks. So they're movable tunnels. All right, and the rationale for this will become a little more, clear when we talk about it. But if you look at something like this, right? This whole thing can be installed on a track, and that track goes down from here down there, or one on the other side. So you can actually get this, or it could be on a sled. And if it's a sled, you'd have to move it with a tractor. But if it's on a track and rollers, you can actually move it.
Oh, wow.
All right, so you can move it to this field. And then you can move it back, and then you can move it over here. So if you've got tunnels of this size, which is 30 by 72, and you had 3 of these, okay? So you had 3 plots of land here, 3 here, and then 3 here with 3 tunnels. You're covering half an acre with your high tunnels. All right, that's a lot of land. All right, it's a lot of land to cover. Now, if you did the 30 by 20s instead of the 72 by 30s, all right, you're looking at about a quarter of that. All right, so instead of half an acre, you're looking at an eighth of an acre. Okay, so you can manage those things. The reason why you would do something like that is something we haven't really talked about yet. And that is the idea of cover cropping and doing crop rotations within your tunnel. And that is vital to success. It's really vital to the success of long-term, the success of your soil and preventing disease, managing the nutrients in it, your organic matter, but it's also important if you want to be able to have a multiple season. You want to be able to have, I'll just give you a quick example. If you're in a state like Michigan, they're going to have a little different of a climate in their summer than we're going to have here. And they may have a tomato season, right? And then that tomato season, it's going to be nice, good length, and it may be of sufficient length that they can have indeterminate tomatoes. All right, who knows what's the difference between indeterminate and determinate tomatoes?
Indeterminate keeps growing.
Indeterminate keeps growing. So what happens with determinate?
They get to a size.
They get to a size.
Mainly one big crop.
Mainly one big crop. Yeah, one and done. All right, so determinate is one and done. The indeterminate will just keep growing. All right, so in some of these other states where they have maybe longer season, then you can do indeterminates, and that really won't be a problem, and that's probably going to be your preference. It means you're going to have to think about staking it really high. You're going to be working on that because they're going to keep growing. They're going to just keep growing, okay, until they don't. Now, that's advantageous in some ways. But our climate also gives us 2 tomato seasons. Each one of them is a little shorter than their one long season, but together we have more time to grow tomatoes. Right? We have more time to grow tomatoes than they do. All right, so that means you'd have, you might want to look at something more like determinate tomatoes, that you could plant as early as January with some cover, or February. You transplant them, you get them out there, and this is something that you might want to do in succession planting. Does anybody know what that is? All right, so I see some heads nodding. So what is succession planting?
When you leave, like you'll plant your first set and then you'll leave an interval of maybe 2 weeks and then plant another set so everything doesn't come off at the same time. You just have.
So if this is our field over here, right, then we're not planting all of these at one time. We got what, 5 rows of tomatoes over here, right? We might plant 1 a week, for example. And then we would have time that would come off, all right? And, but if you did plant something that's indeterminate or plant something that's a little longer than that, tomatoes is a good example of where you can pull things off when they start to get green and then bring them inside, But so you're starting to look at something, that's a January to February, January to June kind of thing here. Then what's next? Then what are you going to do? Any ideas? After tomatoes, what might you do? What's that? You could do peppers. You could do peppers. But tomatoes and peppers are in the same family. All right, so you may want to think of something outside of that family, right, that you might want to bring in to kind of give your soil a little break.
You really have to know, I guess, what goes with, or what goes best after that is done.
So this is where it gets complicated. Yeah, it does, because you have to know what would follow. Ideally, you want a different family. You might want a nitrogen fixer in some way, But you also have to pick something at this time of year that would be able to tolerate the heat. All right, so you got a couple of options that you could think about. One might be chickpeas. Chickpeas. Yep. Chickpeas would be a good option. Chickpeas, buckwheat, there are things like that you can grow. Cut flowers. Cut flowers. You can put cut flowers in there. You can make good money off of cut flowers, If you want to, it's not necessarily the best crop for high tunnels overall just because of the costing, what you can get up. You can put okra in there. That'd be something else that you could follow with. Maybe. They may be okay along with the chickpeas, but I'm not 100% sure on those. So yes, ma'am.
At this particular time of the year, one of my burning questions is: are there particular types of tomatoes and peppers and okra that do better in the high tunnel than out? Like, I'm looking for specific names of,
I'll tell you where the best place to start with that. There are really 2 things that you want to do. One is go to a place like Johnny's Seed. Okay, has anyone heard of Johnny's Seed? Go there and look specifically for high tunnel varieties. All right, and then that's a good place to start because you can use that and then go look for that variety at other places as well, and then you can start to see things. But really, the other thing that you want to look for is selecting specific varieties that are disease resistant. All right, so understanding what diseases are most prone to, and if you have anything that is coming up through your soil, target it because it's harder to control. It's harder to control that within a tunnel. So it's better if you can get resistant crops.
The Extension Service has a good, the market, the newspaper that tells you what to plant when. It has a lot of good information.
They do. I think I got a copy of that right here. I'll pull that up in a minute. But yeah, that's a really good. So when you're looking at that, you would think about a little bit of space on either side for high tunnels, right? Because that's a normal opportunity, but you're going to see faster growth in high tunnels. But you're going to probably want to cut short some on the heat. Although I'd say, just like you were growing tomatoes, you could have had planted lettuce at the same time. Yeah, lettuce, Swiss chard, crops like that could be coming up at the same time as the lettuce, and then you're swapping over to something else like, chickpeas or okra or something. And then you can come back in with a late fall crop, and you can still come back in and have a winter crop, but you got to have something that's really cold. So if you're really good at the management side of that, you could have 4 growing seasons. But if you're doing this, you have to think about cover crops. You have to think about not just what you're taking out of the soil, but what you're giving back to it, right? You want to help regenerate that organic matter as you go, and controlling pathogens and diseases along the way, right? Delaney, what do you want to add to that? I'm sure you got.
I think someone asked about food season, growing season, when it gets too cold. It becomes a time with these systems that's the time you put in your cover crops, your clover or your some type of cool season planting that can tolerate cold weather and also can continue to grow, because what you want is live roots in the ground all the time. You want live roots in the ground all year round. Because what we said soil was one of the primary requirements for seed germination and plant growth and plant development. Okay, so the soil is a living system. And what we mean by living, it's has a microbiology, microbial organisms that are in that layer of topsoil all the time. So when they are functioning and generating nutrients, but when at the same time they have a need of carbon in order to provide energy inputs, that's what they feed on. Just like they break down decompose plant matter and whatnot, but they're getting they're getting something from it, right? You don't just eat it just be eating something, you're getting something from it. So they're getting carbon perspective from it. That's the energy source. Like we eat food, what do we get? Protein, fiber and stuff, so that's why we eat it. Okay, so you want to have that during your coldest season. And it's not like, well, I ain't growing nothing because I'm not getting no benefit, I'm not able to harvest this, but it's doing something good. You got to look at the whole collective picture. You don't just say, well, I just got to plant 365 days a year. No, that's not the idea. You want to manage it where you're going to have that time to your soil to rejuvenate, and it's generating and manufacturing nutrients that are going to be available for you next cash crop season. So, yes.
Okay, I'm real new about this cover crop. That's the thing I didn't understand. So, why would I want cover crop in my high tunnels? And when do I chop it down?
Good question. Good question. Dan, you want to do that now? I'll come behind you.
A good reason to have a cover crop in your high tunnels, like what Delaney said, or touch off what he said to begin with. You want something on that soil living at all time, not only from a standpoint, if it was outside, from an erosion standpoint. That live cover is going to intercept that raindrop, keep that raindrop from hitting the soil. Once it hits the soil, then you have detachment. Well, also you have plant roots. Plant roots make micropores in the soil, helps with infiltration of water, and also it pulls carbon out of the atmosphere, takes carbon to feed the microbes. There's also benefits of planting cover crops such as brassicas or legumes. Legumes are going to be a source to be able to fixate nitrogen in your high tunnel. Therefore, providing plant food, once you terminate those cover crops, you have nitrogen available there already that you don't have to supplement in for those crops. I mentioned the brassicas. A lot of times they're deep-rooted plants, and they can help break up soil compaction, or if you need, if you've had that issue. There's also several that are good at scavenging leftover nutrients that are in the soil. Say you've been fertilizing your garden. If you happen to put out a little too much fertilizer, or there's also going to be nutrients left from the plants that you were growing that can volatilize and leave there in the atmosphere. There's cover crops will cycle those nutrients, basically uptake those nutrients from the soil and hold them and use them until you terminate that cover crop, and it puts that nutrients back in the soil, and it's ready for whatever vegetable or your next crop that you're going to be growing to be able to uptake and help save you money on your inputs for your vegetables.
Daniel, I figured that out, but I lick my finger and put it out here and feel the wind. That's right. That's how I figure out that.
What? When you cut it down.
All right. So that's how I know if how my nutrients are doing in my soil, right? Now, what do I need to do?
Soil test.
Soil test. Okay.
Soil test.
All right. You need a soil test. You need to test your soil. You need to get in the habits of testing your soil. You know what else you need to get in the habit of doing? Keeping records. Keeping records. That's how you're going to know. All right. As we've talked about in previous workshops, you need to be your own scientist. All right. You can get crazy with it. Be your own mad scientist. Figure it out. Keep records. You need to know what you planted and when. Right? You're dealing with little micro systems of soil within here, and you have to think about rotating those. So we talked about cut flowers a minute ago, right? So cut flowers and herbs, herbs, those are something else you can grow, right? But you can't grow a whole high tunnel like this full of herbs. I mean, you can, but where are they going to go? There's not a market for it, okay? Unless you've got a big commercial buyer, which none of us have, that's not going to happen, all right? So you have a small part of that set aside for your herbs, all right? And you may have a small part of that set aside for your cut flowers. Now, you may think about doing a mix of cut flowers in there as well so that you can create bouquets, right? And so instead of selling them $1 for a stem, you might be able to sell $30 for a bouquet, and get a little more out of that. So you think about how to optimize different areas of that tunnel. And each thing you're putting in there does something. It gives or takes something with the soil. And wherever that was, you want to move it around and put something else in there. We didn't mention, and this is not something that you would normally think about in terms of a high tunnel, but sweet potatoes, all right? Now, we're not talking about mass commercial production of sweet potatoes. We're not talking about that. We're talking about sweet potatoes that are good because they help your soil, all right? And you can have a limited version of them for yourself and for your smaller market if you're doing farmers market. So that's something else to think about. Beets are fantastic. Beets are fantastic. They're a great crop, and they're something that you can use over the winter. Now, the question, yes.
So keeping something alive in the ground year-round means I have to irrigate also during the winter, right?
But this is a good point, though, for that. You're supposed to be running your irrigation, especially if you've got drip or micro. You should be running it even when you're not planting, even if you're not planting stuff, because it can clog, it can get crushed by soil on top of it. So you should already be doing that for the safety of your irrigation system.
Okay. My second question is, I really like to grow organic and heirloom varieties. Do they do well in high tunnel environment, or do I need to keep them outside? She's shaking her head. Are they
No,
they do good with us.
yeah,
And let me go back to the first part of your question there. Then what we said about irrigation, and we have what we also call mulching, moisture retention. And it's a soil health measure or practice that helps maintain the moisture in your soil for longer periods of time. That reduces the need for irrigation. So, and then during the winter months, like you say, you have shorter day lengths, and then you have that moisture retention where you have your residue, your mulching, your stubble mulch from the previous crop, then we are looking at that kind of moisture being retained in the soil that you probably don't need any type of irrigation for your winter cool season cover. So, but in the event that you do, then that will be decided upon that. But for the most part, you have that stubble mulch and our residue that's on top of your surface. It's going to retain a certain probably moisture year round until your next crop season.
Okay, so in response to that, I noticed that a lot of times when I see pictures of people growing the high tunnel, the ground is bare. So I know that they probably use some kind of pesticide to kill off, weeds or whatever, and then growing, and you are able to mulch. But if you're doing organic growing or just not wanting to use pesticides and you're planting through that weed barrier stuff.
But maybe they just built it.
But the ground shouldn't be bare. Yeah, it's probably not.
What he said.
Another way, if you want to do it organically and you're wanting to plant into the cover crop, a lot of people take if you're talking about the mulch, they'll take and run the mulch over the top of the cover crop, and that's how they actually terminate it. Once you cover that cover crop with that mulch, at that point, it can't breathe, it can't operate anymore, so you're terminating it like that, and then you'll plant directly into your mulch.
Oh, cool. But you're talking about a mulch as in like a loose material, or because people call those the wheat barriers mulching it also, like plastic mulch.
Yeah.
So like, what are you referring to?
The plastic.
You're talking about plastic.
Yes.
Putting that over the cover crop is terminating.
On your rows.
They plant through that.
That's right. Yes. That's the way I've seen some people do it.
As
a way of
it's
termination.
A good way to suppress it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then some will winter kill. So they'll die off on their own over winter. But the plastic mulch is a good way to do it. One thing, residue is what's left over from the plant. This is important, and we talk about this in the field a lot. It's a good practice for building up the organic matter in your soil. But what you want to think about here in the high tunnel is disease control and pathogen control. And so when you've got a crop, you've got tomatoes, you've got another cash crop, you need to keep your tunnel clean. Keep it clean. You trim it, you cut it, you prune it. Take it out. Do not let it sit around. Do not let it sit around. You got to get that out of there. Keep your tunnel as clean as you can. And that's how you keep it sanitized, and that's how you keep disease out and prevent those pathogens from getting back in there the next time. Because they will get down in the roots, or get down in that topsoil, and they'll live in that, and then they'll come back up. So don't let them have that opportunity to do it.
And did you just say, like, if I'm pulling up vegetables, the old stuff, it needs to immediately come out of the high tunnel?
If you're picking things out, and don't let the refuse sit in between the rows, and don't leave it there. Go ahead and clean that out. Yeah.
Yeah, we're talking about your stalk. It's your stems, your decomposition, every leaves, but the fruiting components. Then, like I say, you try to remove that, because that's just going to rot and decompose, and you don't have the right volume of bacteria. Now, you're looking at an artificial system, like I say. You're not looking at a natural outdoor type of system. You're looking at something that's controlled. So it's certain things you have to be mindful of, because it's artificial for the most part now. So you're not looking at everything that's natural. So you have to try to help it along in that respect, because mold and build up, and it causes the breeding of unwanted type pests, unwanted type organisms invading your system, and that causes other problems down the road, because it's competing with those type of pathogens, where you want the good pathogens that's generating nutrients that puts back into your soil. That's what you're looking at. You're looking at a healthy, clean system, and you don't look at something that's got to decompose that fruit material, because when it rots, it gets a smell. But for stems and stalks and stuff, you don't get that same odor from just the stem and stalk. But the fruiting components, that's where you get your stench from. Yep. Yes.
To that point, what you just said, I grew some Brussels sprouts, but I'm not able to go out to my farm a lot. So when I went, I was just smelling this awful smell, and a lot of them at that bottom layer, they were rotting. So I kind of cut it off, and I threw that in the compost bin, but I don't know, but I did. I left like a lot of the old stems and stuff. I pulled it off. I just left it in the bed because I thought it would help. But in actuality, I should be taking all of that out, or did
Are
they
you talking
apply
about
to
your
that
high tunnel,
because
or
we're not in a high tunnel?
in your high tunnel or your field?
It's in a raised bed on the field. Yeah. So that doesn't really matter.
Well, it just depends on what you're doing for pest and disease control overall, and if it's a problem.
Yeah.
You know, but it can be a little more difficult to control inside of a high tunnel. So you want to take the extra precautions that you can.
And I watch a lot of YouTube videos, and when we're talking about cover crops, they go out and they bend them down, and then they put the plastic cover over it, and then they show it weeks later or a month later, and they remove it and everything's dead. So when you're saying something like that, you don't have to come in and pull it up because the plastic has killed it, so it's fine. Okay. All right.
What? Yes, ma'am.
I'm not sure if I got an answer about the heirlooms because they tend to have a lower disease resistance package on those heirloom varieties than maybe like F1s.
Yeah, I don't think there's any certainty to anything, you know, within that. But I know that Dave Choctaw has had good success with. I've had their heirloom tomatoes, and they're delicious. You know, and they've had a lot of success with them. I know other farmers who have as well. You might have to play around with varieties that work. We'll do a little research and see what we can find out in terms of that answer for you in terms of the specific heirloom varieties that might do well here. Yeah.
And then could you say a word about pollinators? Like should our habits be in terms of allowing those pollinators to come in?
So this addressed that really just in terms of tomatoes, okay? So tomatoes are self-pollinating, all right? And they get pollinated in two different ways, or two different things contribute to their pollination. One is bees, bumblebees, and the other is wind. And they actually end up doing the same thing, which is shaking. They shake here, and that is what allows the pollination to happen. When the bees they grasp onto it, they start shaking as well. So it all depends on what's happening inside your high tunnel with the wind. So I just read a study about this, and I can pull up the over lunch. I'll try to find that over here. But it was the woman who was running the study said that she couldn't figure out why her tomatoes were not being productive. So she looked at all the fertility, she looked at everything, she was looking at the soil, trying to figure it out. They just weren't fruiting like she thought they should. And after kind of a process of elimination, they say, well, maybe they're not pollinating. You know, so they conducted an experiment, and they started using blowers, leaf blowers on them for a very short interval. Like it was like I think it was what we would say is like 10 seconds for it's something like 10 seconds 4 days a week per plant. So it's like doing this per plant. So they did it on a number of different intervals, and they tested the one that was best, and that was the one that responded best. And they went from like 6 fruits to like 12, you know, and they did discover, yes, this was a pollination issue. You know, that we were not getting, bees were not accessing it, and they did not have enough wind inside the tunnel to shake it naturally, so they brought in that little something extra to do it, you know. And that's just that understanding how that pollination was happening. But as Delaney was talking about earlier, when you're thinking about the planting that's going on in the tunnel, you're never just thinking about the tunnel. There's a whole space that goes around this. And that's where, you know, you do want to make sure that if you've got a hive, you know, you've got, you know, something out here, or you've got other pollinators out here, and you are thinking about where your water is coming from, where is your irrigation water going to come from? That is a huge question that you got to get. And where is it going to go? You know, where is it going to go? You have to think about all those things. One thing we haven't really touched on yet that is, it's really important for the management of your high tunnel. It's one of the more important things for the management of the high tunnel, and that is salt buildup. All right, salt buildup. Why might this happen?
Because of the irrigation can contribute.
I've heard irrigation, I've heard fertilizer. Okay, do we have a third response? All right, what's that? What's that?
Can salt corrode things? You said salt. You talking about SAL?
Salt in the soil.
Okay.
Yes.
Could it be corrosion?
Delaney, do you want to take this?
Well, I might have, well, I feel like I have something to say. I feel like I have something to say here.
The man's got something to say.
No.
Everybody, please listen up.
So salt can clog your irrigation. Salt can burn your roots on your plants, as well as kill your radicals as they're germinating and emerging. But another one is salt buildup is a big problem in high tunnels, especially if you use drip and micro irrigation, because unlike other forms of irrigation, drip and micro does not do well at flushing salt into the deeper levels of the soil away from your plant. So they've tested a lot of different methods for trying to remove the salt out of your high tunnels. One of the best ways to still do it is to, I think they did on some of these high tunnels just a few weeks ago, is have surface irrigation before you do planting. Flood the inside of your tunnel and let it sit and let that flood pull all the salt down deep below where your root zone is going to be, because drip and micro, it'll get clogged by the salt, but it's not putting enough water out to push the salt away from the plants in a consistent manner.
You have a cover, right?
Yes, and also the salt corrode, that was a question, Dex.
Yeah, yes, I do not know about as much about salt corrosion, so I'll let you handle that.
Yes. Yes, sir. Sodium chloride, calcium chloride, all those different things, that's salts. And fertilizers, and you got salts in your waters. So anytime you got all that type of sodium, calcium, magnesium chloride, all those different type of chlorides are salts. So and then like I say, that builds up over time if it's not, because don't have any use for it. So it's but you do have some plants that require some type of sodium, but as for the most part, it's a lot of residue that's left over. It turns to residue, it just precipitates. And then that's what we're talking about, that's left. And then it inhibits good nutrient transfer, because salt, it blocks the nutrient transfer, because salt is an alkaline type of element, and then it blocks and then it increases the pH, so that blocks a lot of nutrient transfer into your plants. So that's one of the, and you call salt toxicity. So it's a blocking of your essential nutrients for the plants to try to take it up. And then your roots, they don't favor it either, because your roots, they don't have any use for it, so your roots, they'll kind of close up and stuff, and prevent that, try to protect the plant. So in protecting the plant, what are they doing? They're not allowing the essential nutrients to get into your systems.
So this is why salt is a big issue, right?
Right, that's it.
It changes the pH, right? And it prevents the nutrients from getting taken up by the plants themselves, right? So a natural way of relieving the salts is rain. You know, rainwater will take those salts out. That's what normally happens in the field, but because we have this cover on the high tunnel, you're more susceptible to that buildup. So that is one reason why people have the tunnels on tracks, so they can move it off and they can let the rainwater wash some of those salts away. All right, that's one of the reasons. People also can take the roof off, you know, or take the tarp off the top, and let some rainfall hit that periodically. You can do that. There are other things that we talked about too.
That's hands, David.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
What about well water? Would that be better? Would the well water have salt buildup?
It's likely that well water and even municipal water will contain salts of different kinds. So you can help treat that if you want to. So these are different ways of mitigating that. One way to mitigate that is a little more expensive, but you can do it, is having a reverse osmosis system. All right, that will help cleanse those salts. So if you had a system like that and you're mixing it with water from a rain, catchment, and you're bringing in either municipal or well water, you can help knock those salts out. So that's one way on a preventive measure, but it is a little bit of an investment.
Yeah.
We got a question over that way.
I think he had a question.
Her, at the end there, Nina? Yes. Okay, yes. Just please clarify. Now, you're saying the sauce occurs naturally in the water and in the soil?
You have some concentrated of salt in, yes, ma'am. You have some concentrated of salts in the water.
So some concentrates of salts in the water, and then, as you fertilize, it's leaving nutrients behind.
See, and that's one of the things that plants, they don't take it up, and that they take up the sodium, but the chloride is still there. The chloride is what's left as precipitate. Okay, so that builds up because plants, they don't need it, so it's where does it go? It's left as a residue, and over time it builds up in your and that's that question about the well water. Yes, well water brings in salts and iron build up also. Is a concern.
I always thought that a well was supplied by underground springs. Generally, that's what the well you pick up until you get to the springs where the all the reservoir. I mean, I'm wrong, but I thought that
you're right.
The well water is a spring that's underground that supplies the water to the well.
You're right, but at the same time, whatever geology that water is flowing across, it takes on the nature of that particular, like if it's limestone, like up in the Blackland Prairie, up in the, on the west side of the state. All that's calcareous geology, rock, limestone, all that. Okay, you drink that water, and you as well water then versus down the south part of the state, you got a different type of substrate that water is being filtered through. So it takes on the nature of the geology of whatever it is. And you're going to have a different concern with the southern type of well water system than what you do in the Blackland Prairie or the Mississippi Delta. It just depends on the nature of this material that is flowing through and being filtered through. Right.
I know there are a couple more things we definitely want to touch on before we go to lunch. One of those is construction. And Daniel has some things to say about that. Oh, yes, ma'am.
How to mitigate salt.
How to mitigate the salt.
There was one I wanted to add that was specifically for that. The way you shape your beds. So salt will move with the heat in the water. As water evaporates out of your bed, the salt will end up at the highest point on your bed. So if you have a bed that's peaked and has a crown on it, the salt's going to be at the top of that crown. So if you have salt up there and you plant your plants kind of midway down that slope on that bed, you can avoid it. There's a little chart that I've got in one of my irrigation manuals that shows the various different designs that just by shaping your bed, you can avoid the plant interacting with the salt, because the salt always is going to go to the highest point in the bed.
Yeah, I had no idea about that. So we heard, like I said, the man had something to say.
I like that.
So how you shape your beds and where you put it in, allowing the cover to move or to move the tunnel itself. You can even do overhead water in there that can help too. And like we also said, reverse osmosis is another way to help. So there are a number of ways to mitigate that, but salt is a big concern. Yeah. So we want to make sure we talk about. Oh, yes.
So I have a question. So of course, we can't move all 16 of our high schools, of course, but using the Pergola farm in Philadelphia, can we still install the track system even with our existing infrastructure? I mean, because I think we're able to build it up ourselves, so basically we can just take it out, install that, and then rebuild it.
That's a little bit more of an engineering question.
Okay.
So there's a lot of literature on it, but it's not really common in Mississippi. So it's not anything that our extension is written on that I've found. But there are other areas. I've got some articles, and I'll put them in the presentation, and so you can reference those. But we can also talk with you can come out there and look at it and see if we can help figure out a way to do that. For especially if those tunnels are past their contracting point with NRCS, then and you're not under an existing agreement with those, then we can certainly explore it and see if that could work with the existing ones. So we want to make sure that we talk about constructing the tunnel itself, the steps that you go through. We've talked a lot about some optimization opportunities already, but and I also want to touch on a little bit of pricing, and marketing, and just thinking about returns in a high tunnel and how you might approach that. All right, Dan, I can pull your presentation out.
Well, it doesn't matter however you want to do it. It's kind of off in it, a little piece on the site selection. And we've already touched on a lot of it. One of the most important things when considering a high tunnel is your site selection. Do you have a suitable site to install a tunnel? Do you have that area that is less than a 5% grade, and hopefully less than that? You also need to think about when you're leveling out that site. When you do level it, if you have to move a bunch of dirt and cause a bunch of fill, well, that may necessarily not be a good location, because anytime you disturb the soil, you're removing your topsoil and you're getting down into subsoil. Well, what do we know about the difference between your topsoil and your subsoil? Subsoil is going to be a lot less productive. Doesn't have near the organic matter, near the microbes, not near the amount of microbes living in it, and plus, whatever fill that you take over here on this side to fill in the location for that tunnel is going to be soft, which may not necessarily be a bad thing for growing crops, but structurally, it's not going to be a sound location to install a high tunnel, and you can have issues with your structure. I think y'all ran into some of that here recently.
Yeah, a farmer decided to, he let the field sit long enough to settle back down, but then when he was installing the posts for the bows, he decided to auger them out with a pretty big auger bit and then do some quickcrete. But he came back the next day and started installing the bows while only letting the quickcrete set for a day. And all those bows got up there, and the weight of them, that whole thing just started creaking and sinking, and it all had to be ripped up and completely redone because he made the holes too soft and didn't let them harden long enough. If he just pounded them in with a hammer.
So there are two ways. So there are 2 ways to put your post in, right? You take your post and you hammer them in. Well, after you've done all your measuring, that's a really important thing, and you know where they need to go. You hammer in, or you auger it out, which means you use you can hand do it, but you use an augurer and you create a hole basically, and you're going to put cement in there, and then put the post in there. And that's something that you don't really need to do as much down here in the south, but you might if you're in heavier winds or snow-packed areas.
And another thing to think about before you start construction, it's always good to be aware of utilities. Anytime you're building or constructing anything subsoil, you need to call Mississippi 811 to come out and locate any kind of utilities that you may not know that's there. There are numerous, we got fiber optic lines, gas lines, electric lines, water lines, and some of those can be very costly if you damage them, and also life-threatening. So make sure you call Mississippi 811 before you start any kind of construction. Another thought is, who are you going to get to build your high tunnel? You're going to do it yourself, or are you going to try to get your manufacturer?
You're going to call Kenny. Call Kenny.
And this is by no means a direct science, or it's just an estimate, but USDA estimated it takes about 80 hours of labor to install a 30 by 72 high tunnel. Do you have that much time in order to be able to do it? Also, something to think about, are you going to have anybody that can help you do it? The likelihood of you being able to stand up 20 or 30-foot bows by yourself is going to be pretty much impossible. So you also have to have help lined up to do it with you as well. Also, you got to think about a time manner when you're doing the high tunnel. If it's something that you get into, if you are in a contract with NRCS, something to think about is before you can receive payment for completion of that high tunnel, it has to be built and completed to the specifications. So the longer it takes you to get it erected, even if you're saving money by doing it yourself, the longer it takes you to get it done, the longer it's going to be before you can receive that compensation for the end product. Also, do you have the skills to do it? I mean, not everybody is meant to be a engineer per se, or constructor. And also, it takes, like you were saying, making sure you're getting it square. You know, that's a huge deal, getting it squared. And have a question back here?
Go ahead. I'll wait till you finish because I was going to share something. I work in the engineer department and I know that you have to know what's on the property. You go ahead.
Okay. But yes, squaring off your high tunnel. If it's not square, whenever you go to put it together, you're not going to be able to make it, make all the parts fit together. It's just like, it's a building. I mean, it's not just something you're throwing together. And so you also need to think about, the more steps you take to do it right on the front end, the longevity that you're going to be able to get out of it. And that's what we're shooting for, is the longevity that you'll be able to grow crops, and it's an investment for your farm.
If I can add one thing to that. So these things are not inexpensive, okay? I think the reimbursement rate right now, the estimate is that it's around $12,000 for a 72 by 30, something like that. And you may be able to get a little more or less, okay? But it's not just that cost, all right? You got to think about all the time you're going to put into managing it, all that the time, and it can be worthwhile. It can be productive. You can make money off of it. But it's a lot of investment. But if you do that tunnel wrong in your setup, if you don't adhere to the specifications, not just because it's NRCS specifications, but because you're going to have an inferior structure, right? And it's not going to do what you need it to do. You have shortcut yourself in that process. So you really want to make sure that you get it installed right, one way or another. And Kitty, how many people usually on a high tunnel install for you?
4 to 5.
4 to 5? 4 to 5 who know what they're doing, or is this like you just pull them off the, hey, y'all want to come over here and help?
4 or 5 who know what they're doing.
4 or 5 who know what they're doing. Okay, and how long does it generally take?
3 days.
3 days. 4 or 5 people who know what they're doing. Takes 3 days.
And how much money?
Them?
And how much money?
Depends on the kit and where you're located.
Can you give an average?
On the average, anywhere from $42 to $3,200.
And I'll say a few years ago when supplies and materials where the cost had gone up a lot, there were companies that were basically saying, because this is in the contract, we'll give it to you for $8,000. We'll sell it, but if you want it installed, it's another $8,000. So that can be the market. So you need to make sure that you find good and affordable contractors out there, and that you get engaged in that, and you make sure you need to make sure that it's done right. So you need to know enough about the process that you're asking the right questions, making sure that your land is prepped.
That's right.
Make sure your land is prepped, and that they do the work in the right way.
They go through the sign-up period, open. sign-up period.
Okay, all right, yeah, we'll run through that.
Okay, that's all right.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and we'll go through it now.
One more thing along with electric and utilities. Make sure that if you're in an urban area, and you're trying to put one in, that you check with your city ordinances. All right, make sure that you do that. Some places allow them. Some places may say they've got to be 15 feet back or 30 feet back or something like that. So you just need to check on that.
What about the possibility of use? Maybe someone has someone that is they're not using anymore, and they don't want it.
Okay, now this is a really important topic right here. Unfortunately, there are a lot of high tunnels that have been distributed that are not in use right now for various reasons. But I think one of the most important reasons is that people didn't know what to expect. They didn't really know how to manage it. They didn't really know what they were taking on, and so they weren't able to operate it well. And they thought, oh, we're getting something that'll just kind of take care of itself, or it's maybe like a greenhouse. But it's not that. It does require a lot of management. You can do a lot with it, but you have to put a lot into it in order to get something out of it. And so there are a lot of barren tunnels. So it does create opportunity for someone who said, well, I can't invest in one right now. I want to get on the high tunnel list with NRCS, but it's going to take maybe a year to do that, or maybe I don't get it the first year, and you want to get started, work with someone who's got one. Maybe you can work with them where they are. Maybe they've already got it installed and they're just not using it, and you can work a deal with them to start with their tunnel and grow something there and give them a little of the product back, or maybe they'll just sell it to you, So there are a number of things you can do that way. That's a really good idea, though.
So leading up to that, NRCS only covers if you're starting from scratch, not trying to get it from existing.
Correct.
That's right.
Correct.
That's right. So exactly. So the NRCS would not pay for that. That would be on you. Yeah.
We had another question. I think we have two questions, but right back there.
Okay, now, did I understand you to say that high tunnel contributes like 4 additional weeks to your growing season?
They can. Yes. Yeah.
I mean, that's it.
What's that?
Is that all?
But and it's going to be.
It's a lot of management, but that's not all.
Well,
it's not
on either
all.
side of your season.
So 8 weeks.
On either side of your season. So that's like 2 months. So basically, but again, what we were talking about earlier, if you do it right and you manage it, and you're growing crops over the winter, that you can grow kale. You can grow other things that will survive. You can grow beets. There are things that you can grow. You can grow year round, within the tunnel, and you can do things that you would not be able to do in the field. It does give you flexibility. Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to add another benefit that maybe people don't think about, but I think about because I live in an area where other people spray their crops by playing, and so it offers protection in that way also, because I've gotten drips on my outside stuff, but not in the tunnel.
That's right. That's a good idea. You see those planes? You close up your tunnel. You press that tunnel. You press that button, and it's like.
I think we had another question
Does
up here.
NRCS cover it if it is on the tracks? If somebody wants to make it mobile?
I would think so, as long as it is built to the manufacturer's specification. It has to be in a kit, manufacturer's kit specification.
And you don't have to order from a Mississippi company.
No.
So
Does not have to be
you may have to go outside of the state to find a kit that is spec'd for that can do it. And the one thing that would concern with is probably cost for shipping. That would be the thing that you'd have to take into account.
Yeah, I'm not real familiar with what the track would cost, but I bet it would probably add a significant additional cost to that tunnel. Because you got a lot of moving parts there.
It's a lot of moving parts. From what I've read on the tunnels that are spec'd for tracks as well, they look at this as like an upgrade. So there may be things that they include in that they don't include on other tunnels. It might be that you're more likely to get a ridge-based system, where you have ridge venting across here. So we talked about the vents on the end, right? The gable vents on the end, but you can also get high tunnels with ridge here, which is really nice, and can help cool it off. So I've got a picture of it here. I'll pull that up in a bit. But it's basically that it comes like this, and then this part, you can open the flaps up, and the air can move out. Okay, so it's another option. So you're more likely to get things that have things like that, or just another little option. You don't see it here, but there are a lot of tunnels that have truss systems in there. You guys know what a truss is?
Yeah.
It's a brace, exactly, that would kind of come across this way. So it kind of connects here and here, but it comes across. And so a lot of people use those trusses instead of stakes, or to support, you want to grow, blueberries, or tomatoes, or other things like that. You can use that system, and they make some specific rollers that you can put up here that you can constantly adjust it as your crops are growing. So there are a lot of ways that once you get kind of used to doing a high tunnel, you can optimize it. You can figure it out. They've been around long enough that there's a lot of innovation going on around them. Not all of it's reimbursable by NRCS, but if you're really doing this right, you want to get to the point where it's like, maybe I don't need NRCS. For the cost share, what you do need them for is to come out and help you on the technical side. Let me just stress that now, because Daniel may not stress that enough, but they are here for you on the technical side. Get them to come out to your farm and help you do an assessment, and help you think about conservation plan, help you think about engineering for this, and the other practices that you might need. We wanted to have a lot of this conversation so that you're prepared. You're thinking about, okay, I need to talk about drainage. I need to talk about erosion. I need to bring that to their attention so I can get their minds thinking about engineering solutions for that, and what are the best overall options for me, so I could get a suite of practices, if I want that might accompany that. Daniel, does that sound good?
I think we had a question in the back here.
No, I was gonna say something about the Roundup, the spraying that crop with Roundup, and you got your crop, but the high tower is gonna be a way to keep the Roundup and all of the chemicals. That's the block. That's the only thing I was gonna say.
Is there a specific earlier this year or last year they came out and took pictures for our guests to see if we qualify for the scoring or the ranking system for a high tunnel. So we will be notified this year, and then after, if I'm able to get it, will they give us a list of installers? Will they give us a list of manufacturers, or we do that on our own research on that?
Both. There's a list. The MSU Extension Service has a list. I don't know if they are still keeping it up to date.
Okay.
But there is a list with various manufacturers.
Okay.
And you can call off that list and look do research on your own as well. But there is a pretty extensive list that they could provide you.
But this was informative because I had no idea. Clearly, I did not know what I was talking about, because I'm thinking this is like a $2,500 system. Install maybe $1,500. Me and my uncles and people down the street. This is a very sophisticated.
Yeah, it's very costly. It really is. It's a big decision, and like I said, it's and a lot of people need to come up with the idea of, is it going to be help you with your production, or is it going to be a burden for you, financially and labor wise, because it's a big investment. It really is.
And again, it's the time and the management of it as much as the upfront cost. There is upfront cost, but if there are ways to do things that aren't in NRCS spec, where you can get high tunnels, you can get smaller versions of that can be less costly. If you're going with the NRCS spec, then it's going to be a little more costly. But it may not come with all the bells and whistles, but it's going to be a little more costly. but they do have cost sharing for those, right? If you are, they have standard and historically underserved cost sharing rates. And I believe for the historically underserved is like 91 cents on the dollar reimbursed, and it's like 82 or something like that for standard. They're good rates.
Okay.
You know, but just applying does not necessarily mean that you'll get one. You know, so that is something to keep in mind. So you really want to be determined to get one. You know, and say I want to do this one way or another. If I can get that, I can get that. If not, then you know I've got another option.
Okay.
You know. So I found this place here online, and I'll provide you guys the link for this as well. But this is a general order of operations for installation. All right. So this is just something that's really handy to think about. All right. So this is just a list of things you do in this particular order. All right. So that you don't get awry with things. Start with your site selection. Then you do your site prep. And we talked about the calling utilities, leveling, you know, all of that. You need to do that. Then you square your structure. All right, that's the next thing you do. That's where you run your strings all around. Use a particular method for this so that you get everything, just all your angles right in there. Then next you set your foundation. And that means you put your ground post in, you know, or if you're augering, you're using your concrete, that's when you would do that. Sometimes, if you're not using NRCS, you know, sometimes people will install a concrete pad. If you're doing that, you'd want to put your poles in here, and then you know, then let your contractor and utility company come in and take care of the pad. Because if you're putting that in, you're probably running utilities underneath the pad. Okay, the next thing you want to do is, Dex, would you be able to hold this up so that we can kind of get a sense of this? You want to assemble the bows.
So yes, each one of these would be a bow that you would anchor into the posts. The posts are what have to be augured or pounded into the ground, and then each bow is assembled and raised individually, starting from one end going down to the other.
All right, so you got the bows in. So we got the post in first. Now we got the bows in. All right. So the next thing you want to do is install your corner braces. All right. So installing your corner braces after your bows ensures that the hip boards and purlins that you're going to install next will be installed correctly. All right. So corner braces next. Then then you install your hip rails. All right. Those are things that go right in the middle, right here. That we want high enough now so that we get good ventilation. We don't want them down here at hip level. We really want them up here. And the reason for installing them now is that we need to make sure that the bows are plumb and level before the next steps. So now we install the baseboards.
That's this large 2x12 down here at the base.
And you can start to get a sense now of how the structure is coming into place and how it's becoming a little more solid as we're going along. All right, the next step is you would install the purlins.
That's these very long runs, and these are more challenging because it requires one or two people up on ladders. You know, this tunnel right here is represents a 14-foot high tunnel. I've done purling installation at this height. It's challenging. It's if you're not comfortable on a ladder, even if you are comfortable on a ladder, it's still a little unnerving. So it takes that one takes a bit.
All right, so after we've installed the purlins, we install the peak braces.
Yep, that's these big braces here.
All right, so those are in the corners right there, and then at this point we do the end wall assembly.
And this one doesn't necessarily represent, because there's a ton of different variations, but the end walls are these, and these are framed up with wood. And as I was saying earlier, can vary. You can have double doors, you can have a single door, you can have a door that just a person can walk through. So that's, you know, dealer's choice. Do you need to get a small tractor in there? You need big double doors. So that's up to you.
And the height make sure that you account for the height of your entrance here, all right? If you're going to bring any equipment in here, you got to think about what that's going to be. The last thing you want is, oh, well, too bad, now we can't, till in there. And also at this stage, you have all kinds of options for ventilation and heaters and other things that could be installed on these end walls. That's really where the most opportunity lies for customization. Next, you install your spring wire channel, or your, what's the other word for it?
Wiggle wire.
Wiggle wire. Such a great word. So you install your wiggle wire, all right? Next, install your plastic corner wind panels, all right? And then your in-wall plastic covering. And then you do your top cover, all right? And that's the main piece that comes with your greenhouse kit, is that top cover. And after that, you do your roll-up slides. And this includes like the roll bars, and you want to attach the roll bars, and you want to test the roll bars before you move on. Make sure you test them at this point and that they're working effectively. And then you install what they're calling the anti-billow system for roll-up sides. So that's like a rope in a zigzag pattern, and it keeps them from blowing around in the wind.
But
Okay.
a big thing that they stress in these videos and series where they show you doing it is wind. Is when you're installing the plastic, you really have to be mindful of the wind, because that is a really large sheet of plastic. With a little bit of wind behind it, it can lift off, it can rip, it can tear. So you really have to be mindful of the wind and pay attention to it when you're doing it, trying to get it done quickly, but also doing it right, because you don't want that massive, massive sheet flying around.
So what she's just saying is that it's hot like right up here, So that's why if you've got the crops in there, especially something like tomatoes, you want to get this up as high as it can go, so that air can come in through here and get over that canopy. Because if you've got tall crops like that, they need that circulation at the top too. Delaney, what do you want to add about this? Y'all see the beds in here?
That's a type of mulch.
James, what's going on here next?
Canvas mulch. Right. Right.
So I think we'll do squash.
Well, all you need is something to block that sunlight, block that heat, trap that heat.
All right, so you did tomatoes last fall.
Yep.
Okay, and then you went from tomatoes to
Greens, and this one and carrots in that one.
You went to tomatoes to greens in here.
Yep.
All right. So tomatoes in the fall, greens in the winter, and then you're going to do peppers and squash?
Not peppers, they're in the nightshade family, but it will be squash and zucchini.
What, the nightshade family? What do you mean? What do you mean?
So like tomatoes, peppers, and even potatoes are all in the nightshade family. And whenever you constantly plant something of that species in the same soil every year, it'll build up harmful nematodes into the soil, and your plants will stay sick and just won't produce well. So it's good to rotate them every 4 years.
So because you planted tomatoes in the fall, if you're a nightshade, you don't want to plant peppers now. Okay. But in between that, you had a nice crop of greens in here. All right. So we're talking about 3 crops right there. Right? 3 different seasons. And did you grow anything over the summer, or was it tomatoes all the way through?
We did cucumbers before the tomatoes in the early spring, and then we did kind of early summer, we did some cherry tomatoes in here, and then once those played out, we did the greens.
All right, so that's 4 full rotations through this tunnel. And we have a question over here.
Growing squash in a high tunnel, how does that affect the vine borer situation?
So we try to do everything as organic as possible. I did have to spray some spinosad once last year, but it really wasn't too big of an issue. The main problem we had with squash in the tunnel in the early spring was pollination. So once the summer went on, they pollinated themselves fine, but in the early spring, for some reason, we just couldn't get bees or anything in there. So these sections tilled up beside it, these are going to be some flower fields to incorporate the bees more.
Yes, sir.
So I would have to get up every morning with some Q-tips and pollinate every single squash plant in there. So.
That's dedication.
It's a little bit more work, but it did very well. We got.
Do you find the used Q-tips work a little better?
No, I like the new ones.
Okay, new ones, gotcha.
So do you retail these, or you just, because you made them like, hipped them like rows?
Yeah. So we do minimal tillage in these. We have a BCS tractor that will come through and then just knock all the beds down, put in our soil amendments, and then we'll hit it back up. And we use this landscape fabric. It'll last up to 10 years. We have gone from one crop straight to another without amending the soil or anything. But at least on this one, that one down there is not as bad, but we do have a lot of compaction in this one over time. So usually I can get about 2 crops, but anything more than that, I want to re-amend the soil and break everything.
And what are
up.
you amending it with?
We did a organic pelletized chicken litter last year.
But that's something you had to buy, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Y'all don't make it.
No, we did buy that. Not this year, but next year we plan on planting some clover, some legumes or something to fixate some nitrogen in the soil to cut back on fertilizer costs. Like they mentioned earlier, there's tons and tons of different cover crops you can plant, and then you can incorporate that back in the soil, and then that's just going to break down and add organic matter back into your soil. So.
And that's why you want to do your soil test, so you can also see how much those cover crops are contributing to the nitrogen back in your soil. One thing we didn't mention right up front is that when you first get a high tunnel, right, you're going to want to do deep tillage. You know, you're going to want to go in there and break the ground up first, right?
That's correct, David. And the reason you do that is what we talked about, infiltration. Infiltration, the water that you use for irrigation or whatever the source is to get to that surface, that contact, and just stay there. You want it to keep moving downward. Okay, and also when you're moving downward, what direction do roots grow? Put it downward, vertical. You want the roots to be able to go down there just as easy. And also you want all that air space in order for the soil to breathe. Okay, and therefore you have that opportunity where not only the hip area, you have additional room, opportunity for those roots to go down and tap into what? Tap into a water source and also tap into that nutrient supply. And also it provides anchor, for your bigger plant species. But at the same time, you're looking for good infiltration, downward movement. And that's why we're talking about deep tillage in order to break that hard pan up that first time. And after that, like James was saying, you could use other soil health conventions like tuber crops and stuff like that to keep that soil broken up and clods aerated and stuff. But every so often, every so many years, you still got to go in and do some type of tillage. So
is that like a walk behind, like a Troy belt, kind of like?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. So the only difference about the BCS, it's kind of like the old gravels. It's got a bunch more attachments. There's a mower attachment. If I wanted to plant rye in here and let it get waist high, I can mow it down and then incorporate it into the soil. There's hippers and all that stuff. But any tiller will work.
I call it a BCS tiller.
BCS. So this one and that one, I heard him mention the salinity level that'll build up in a high tunnel because it's not exposed to elements. We did flood both of these before we prepared the beds. So.
So what's the most challenging crop you've come across, you think, for the high tunnel? The one that you tried that's like, maybe I'm not going to try that one again. Or maybe I just didn't do it right.
I wouldn't say it's because of the high tunnel. The tomatoes was challenging. We grew an indeterminate, and it was just, it was a jungle in here. They kept growing and growing and growing. They produced for like 6 or 7 months, and the high tunnel helped. It didn't hurt it at all, but it did kind of get overwhelming in such a confined space.
That's what we talk about, perhaps using determinate tomatoes in the tunnel.
You ever heard of, I've seen on some Facebook groups, high tunnel groups, they grow citrus successfully in a high tunnel in Mississippi.
Okay. I've not seen that. So citrus, that's more of a permaculture type deal. They're a tree, so. Right. But that might be something to look into.
Might be a fun experiment.
Yeah. A lot of people they'll grow cut flowers, all kinds of stuff in these tunnels.
So
watermelons and cantaloupes.
You could definitely do it. Like I said, it's just kind of a smaller space, and those vines need a lot of room, but you could definitely do it. So like cantaloupes or any type of cucurbit, you're going to trellis. So that's pretty popular nowadays, is trellising for the cantaloupes. So if you did a trellis system in here, you could definitely grow cantaloupes.
Do you plant like a double row, or do you plant like a single row of like peppers or cucumbers or whatever you plant on those wide beds?
So with these beds right here, typically we'll do a zigzag shape for our squash. Now the indeterminate tomatoes, we just did a single row so they'd have room to space out, but squash we'll do like a zigzag shape. And then peppers and we actually grew okra in that one as well. We started it earlier, like you said, you get an extra 4 weeks, and okra likes it hot and dry. So because of that, we had okra earlier than anybody else around here because of the high tunnel. So stuff like that, we'll do a double row. Stuff that isn't going to take up much room.
So the food that y'all grow, do you feed the students or do you sell it?
We, some of it goes to the cafeteria, and we're in the process of building a farmer's market here to be open to the public.
I imagine that early okra could command a premium.
Yeah. Everybody like the greens today? Y'all like the greens today?
Yeah.
So those are some of these grown in the high tunnel. Now they've been in the freezer a little while, so I hope they're still fresh, but those are some they grew.
So you
James.
don't introduce, I'm sorry.
No, please, go ahead.
You don't introduce any ladybugs, bees, or anything inside the actual tunnel. It would be in these spaces around it.
Yeah, so typically, say we have a cool night in the spring or something, we'll let the sides down, let it hold some of that heat, and then in the mornings, whenever we get here, we let the walls up to let some airflow get through there, and then typically with flowers around it, the bees and butterflies will be around it, and then they'll go into the tunnels. We actually have a few beehives up here, and they kind of help, but we definitely need more to pollinate everything we got.
So we'll say like around the edges right here, this is something that generally, this is not bad at all, but you want to keep this clean. You know, this is a place where pests can get in. They can harbor there over time, and they can come back. You think you're rid of them in the high tunnel, but they're here, and then they'll come back in. So between seasons and everything, you want to make sure that you're getting the stuff as clean as you can. But this is also where we're talking about where the drain would come. If you had that drain, it would be like right here. Or, again, you might have the gutter up here. James, question for you. Two questions for you. One is, do you always use this same setup of rows in here?
No. So early this fall, whenever we did greens in this one, we had a lot more narrow rows, but a lot more in there. So on squash and stuff like that, what I found works best in these is about 6 rows. So on this one and that one, both have 6 rows in those. But you can definitely, if you had narrow rows, you could definitely put 12 rows in there if you wanted to. It's common practice. A lot of people, I was talking about legumes earlier, people will plant peas or something in a high tunnel. They'll be the earliest to get peas in the state, and then they're adding nutrients back into their soil. And of course, that'd be a real narrow row too.
James, do you practice any intercropping at all?
We haven't with this, so this type of plastic we use, it is possible, but it makes it harder. And you do not have to use the plastic at all. Like they said, you can use wood chips or straw or anything like that. This is just what we try to use. We don't have a whole lot of people down here to help, so we try to do stuff the easy way, I guess you would say, in a sense. Exactly. Instead of coming out here to weed this thing every couple days, this right here knocks it down a whole lot.
How many people do you have working to do all this?
There's 3 of us.
Full time?
Yeah. So, and this is just the tunnels. I mean, we have a large field up there. We have cows. We have students. So we stay pretty busy.
James, is this material you borrowed in and laid, or is this hip material from the natural surface, the ground surface here?
What I use to make the beds?
Yeah, what you use to make the beds with.
So like I said, we'll come through and till everything down. So there was beds in here. I tilled it all down to make everything level. We have a power hara that goes on the back of the BCS, and it'll kind of incorporate everything together, break it down a little bit more than that tiller will. And then we have a hipper attachment that we can come through and hip the rest of the shape of the beds that we
I
want.
think he was asking, did you like bring any manure? You said you had that chicken. You used the chicken.
Yes, we used some chicken. We didn't add any type of topsoil or anything like that. We did add the chicken litter, but that was about it.
Yeah.
James, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say that provides enough nutrients for the plants.
Yeah, we did well, and we do some fertigation through our drip tape and stuff. I'm not saying that's all the fertilizer we got. I'm just saying pre-planting that is what we used.
So, I'm always concerned about the grass here. So if you cut it, and it gets in, will it harm getting inside this high tunnel?
You can throw seeds in there, and it can cause some weeds and stuff to get in there, depending on the plastic you use. So if I cut it, I always blow it out. And then if I'm weed eating or something, the edge, we always let the doors down and then do it, so we're not blowing seeds and stuff inside the tunnel.
Right.
James, would you mind showing us the door on the front? Because I think they've been using some equipment in here, and it'd be nice to kind of see the dimensions of it here, so you get a sense if you want to use some equipment, what you might need in terms of an opening.
We're going to use the back door though.
We're going to use the back door.
Yeah,
Don't use that door. Don't look at that. Ignore that door.
This is a type of tiller machine where kind of like a tiller.
I noticed that tunnel's got
behind
trusses.
it. Yes, ma'am.
Sure.
A little big
Yeah, it's
wheels.
got trusses. Oh, that's great.
Got the tiller in the front, and with different attachments on it.
Right, right.
I do different things. Hip it I do.
So we're going to look at the other tunnel in a second.
And then also,
Jackson and James were just pointing out that the other tunnel has trusses in it, and that's made that tunnel stable apparently in the wind.
First of all, you need to
we had some issues with this one in the wind.
yourself. After that, you
It's safe. Oh, it's safe.
some people, they'll run their chickens and stuff in there.
How often do the tunnels you build have trusses? Is that
Yeah. And the drip tape.
We don't have to come and touch this every day. Once they get water and fertilization, they pretty much do this.
That's drip tape, micro drip tape. Drip irrigation.
I can see
That's
the
what you
damage.
put the water.
Man, that purling got really bent out of shape.
So it's got holes in it, like every 6 inches. And you set the water system to it, and this goes right into the root zone. So you're not wasting water like you do with the hose and spraying everything. You put this right by the plant, about 6 inches away from the plant, and then the water goes right down into the root zone, where it's gonna the plant's gonna the root is actually gonna move toward the water as it comes in there. So it really varies. Different farmers will do different things. So it's like you think about it in terms of how much irrigation water the crop needs across the entire season, and then you try to break it up. Some people are able to do it daily. Some people do it once a week. But probably once a week minimum. But you also just want to know what the soil moisture quantity is, so you're not over watering it, but you take that irrigation water that you think you're going to need, and that's what you just space out. Now,
I mean, I never thought of that. But
when you're doing the drip irrigation system, you can also put liquid fertilizer through the water. So you can use what's called an injector, right? You start the
first thing you do. Some things just strike you when you first look at it. Some things just hit you right in the face. And one of the things that hit me, what do you say?
The slope of the land.
Slope of the land. Well, you already got your amen. Okay. The slope of the land, that would be one concern. That would be my first and foremost primary concern. Is the slope. It's not level. It's not flat. So what we have to do is factor that in as far as how we're going to position, how we're going to orientate, and how we're going to lay, and whether or not we need to do any modifications before we do any type of laying out or decide where we're going to actually place the footprint for the high tunnel project. And that would take some probably engineering, some elevations to come out here and just looking at which way the direction of the water flow. And for me standing right here, I would say you have a break right here. You have a break somewhere right here. Now all this water is going to go, down that way, then it's going to go down, it's going to go back that way. You got two directions based upon just eyeballing observation. Now it will take some engineering to do some grading and taking some surveys to make sure which exactly the direction of the water flow. But that'll be the main thing I'll be concerned about. Okay, and then you would look at how compact is this ground. We know it's a heavy use area because we see development structures have taken place all over the place. We see a gap right there, so we know traffic comes through here. So we know it's probably relatively compact. So like Dave was saying earlier, deep tillage, you need to break that ground up to at least 12 inches, at least 12 inches of good deep tillage to break that ground up, break that hard pan up, to break that plow pan up, whatever you call it, durapan, disapan, plow pan. It's all the same thing. It's going to be a pan probably at somewhere between the depths of 8 to 12 or 14 inches below the surface. You're going to hit some type of contact. And if I hit some kind of contact, what do you think the plants are going to do? They're going to stop too. They're going to get there and they're going to stop too. They're going to start growing horizontal. So you want to make sure you take those concerns into consideration. We would say slope and compaction. Slope and compaction. We had that class, I think, last week. Talk about soil compaction and soil slope gradient. Okay, so therefore, once we get those things figured out, then we need to be concerned about the orientation of which way the wind flows, like we heard earlier in the class, and then the direction of the sunlight. Sun, when it rises in the east and sets in the west, right? Okay, we have to take that into account, and based upon the type of shape of your structure, then that's going to dictate how you're going to orient your shape of the structure. Because one of the things you want to take advantage of what we say it makes plants grow? Sun. You want to take advantage of it. Every minute or every second of sun you can get, you want to take advantage of it. Because that's critical as far as high tolerant plant growth and plant germination and plant health. Okay, so in order to do that, you're going to have to make sure you have that, whatever the shape of your structure is, make sure you take advantage of that. And the dimension, how much dome you have on that particular structure, that's going to be important and critical on how you orient your structure. And also, once you get that constructed, then your planning schedule, your planning sequence, your planning flow plan, footprint layout, your taller species versus your shorter species versus your darker night-shaded species, all those are going to have to take it into consideration when you start your planning program. But right now, we want to just look at the site with nothing on it, and those are the two main factors we want to consider: the gradient, the slope, and also the compaction, because we know it's been heavily trafficked out here, so we already know that. So we want to try to make sure we overcome those two limitations before you do anything else. Any questions or anything?
Delaney, do you see an area that might be more prone to rill or gully erosion?
Yeah, right over there, Dave, where we already see a little slumpage, that's generally where that water, it tends to attract the same direction that it did from the beginning. Water's going to continue to flow in that same direction. It's going to try to find that same weak spot until you divert it to another direction. So that would be my first critical area, non-planting zone over there, right by that gate right there. That would be my first area of concern out here on this site. But this is the most levelest ground we have right here, and the one that next door to us, then it's more uniform ground, but this one has a little gradient, so it's not perfect for the type of construction for a high tone, but it's usable. Any questions, David?
So we're gonna have to go in here and make a pad, make that pad a little bigger than the tunnel, and make it as level as we can.
Well, you want to make it to grade, and that would depend on the engineering report, how you want to grade it. But if you want to do something, and this is all you have, like in most situations where high tunnels are, they're mostly in right there next to your homestead, next to your farmstead, and all your other surrounding buildings or structures on your homestead. So generally, this would be the only ground to land for that type of construction. And generally, it's going to be a zone that has been compacted for some time. It's probably ground that you had not used in the past several years. And you're going to identify some type of concerns that you would have to overcome. So that would be the first thing. And if Mr. Clanton, say for example, he's your contractor, that would be one of the first things you would point out to him. Mr. Clanton, what do you think about this site? Is it suitable? What are my limitations? Mr. Clanton should be able to tell you, but you should be able to know from what we just talked about yourself, those questions you asked. Not just say I want it such and say I want it. It might not be the ideal, it might not be the best suited location. So you have this information that you need to ask yourself those two questions. The orientation, the type of construction, make sure you grasp all the sunlight that you can, your slope gradient to prevent erosion, And also soil compaction, make sure you got good infiltration. And get that site dished or tilled before you start to implement the construction assembly of that particular structure, of that particular high tunnel. Make sure you get your ground broken up first.
Then if you had maybe some topsoil you could bring and till that.
That'll be the time to do it. That'll be the time to do it. Yeah.
You do want to make sure that you're not bringing any disease in there, you know, with that topsoil.
Make sure you know where it came from.
Yeah. And the other thing about it that is the accessibility. It's not quite as high up as some of those other things, but you want to, obviously, your utilities, but where's your water coming from? Where's the water source? Does anybody know where the water source is right out here right now?
There's two of them.
It's
okay. So we got to know where the water source is. And if this is your house, you know, is this close enough to your house? Is this close enough to where you're going to pack? Is it close enough to your supplies? Is it close enough to your access road? You know, those are all things that you really want to take into consideration. And it was one of the things that James brought up a little bit ago. I don't know if everybody heard him, but he said, oh yeah, and it also has got to look nice. You know, so we were talking about the orientation. It's like, oh, should it be like this? He's like, well, they're going to want it like this. They're going to want that uniform. So aesthetic is also something your neighbors may not like where you want to put your high tunnel, you know? So there are other things that you have to take into consideration sometimes.
That's correct.
Do you have a good address for topsoil?
I do not.
Well, you have to, in your local area, you would want to probably try to search for any type of people that have some topsoil they want to get rid of, or they have, you know, that they can let you use, let you harvest.
If anyone can see over there into that other tunnel, right over here, you see those things at the top, those structures in there, they're not in here.
Right.
Right? Okay, so those are the trusses that came with this high tunnel. James was talking about this tunnel has been a little more susceptible to the wind over here, and the trusses may very well be a reason that this one has withstood the wind a little better. And if you've got trusses in here, it also helps for being able to hang things from. That's right, that's right. You can do that with the trusses.
Yeah.
All right. So does anybody else have any more questions about what we've done today?
One question, remember you were talking about wind diversion. What did you call it?
Wind breaks.
Yeah, wind breaks.
Right.
Would it be necessary to put anything out here for wind breaks? Would you be able to put anything?
Well, I don't see where it be. If you orientate your wind breaks, I mean, you can if you. That's an added beneficial use. It don't not necessary to have wind breaks, because if you have your orientation correct, and then those structures should be able to withstand most winds.
If for some reason they had to put the tunnel this way, in this direction, then they may need a windbreak over here.
But you can see the damage. Look at the top of the tunnel.
Oh yeah, I can see that little hose.
Yeah, you can see the damage the wind has done to this one pretty easily. So it's not a bad idea to add if you can.
To add some windbreak.
Yeah.
Okay.
When I thought about it, I was like, they're gonna put this here if they would need it.
So I want to make sure everybody knows we're going to be back out here next week for soil fertility and biology. We start at 9:30 next week. And registration at 9, so be here then. I'm going to put all the contact information back up.
I have a farm. I'm currently raising some goats, looking to do some rotational grazing, really thinking about the soil fertility and get into some crops. So that's what brought me here today, to learn about different ways I could use a hoop house on the farm. Learned about hoop houses, really learned about with NRCS about the bundling, understanding just the critical area around the hoop houses and understand the environment around the hoop houses, and just learning about the impact of just the environment about it. Some things you really want to think about when you're thinking about a hoop house.
I learned a lot of things, especially dealing with the high tunnels. Essentially, we're going to be probably hopefully adding more to our farm. So I got to learn with the truss and one with trusses, one without trusses. You know, one with how it affects the lands and everything, and how we should have how it should be in the interior of the interior of it.
Well, I just happened to see the ad. I guess it came across my Facebook because I do look at like farm stuff and gardening and I follow those groups on Facebook. And I saw it and I said, well, hey, I've been thinking about getting a high tunnel. And because I follow some groups on Facebook and they talk about the advantages of the high tunnel is that I have like a shoulder season. Like I can extend my garden late in the fall and I can start early in the spring. So that's really advantageous, I think. So it was fun to come down here and actually see one and talk to people that are actually working in it and see how they do it. It's one thing if you're reading about it or you're getting out there trying to figure it out yourself, but to come somewhere and walk on the ground and ask questions of real people that are actively growing vegetables and flowers, that's just a huge bonus to me.
We have ducks, sheep, cows, goats, chickens, horses, and we raise quite a few vegetables. I'm here to learn how to use my high tunnel more efficiently. Yes, I picked up quite a bit of information on the rotation, the salt in the soil, and so on. Quite a bit of information.
Today was very fun. This was my first workshop attending here at Piney Woods on our farm, and it was very interesting. We learned a lot about high tunnels and, you know, about the processes and things that I didn't know, so it was very fun. And I thought that high tunnels and greenhouses were the same exact thing, and throughout this session, this workshop, I learned that they were two completely different things, so that was amazing.